I watched the small blue capsule slip from my daughter-in-law's manicured fingers and dissolve instantly into my wife's creamy eggnog. Harper did not know I was watching from the shadows of the hallway. She stirred the drink with a cinnamon stick, a small angelic smile playing on her lips as she turned to face the crowded room of wealthy guests. It was a smile that promised warmth, but I knew it hid a viper's fangs. She was planning to humiliate my wife to make Esther look senile in front of the board members so she could seize our company. I did not scream. I did not cause a scene. I waited for her to turn her head to wave at a photographer. In that split second, I stepped forward and quietly swapped the glasses. When she turned back, her eyes landed on me. I raised my own glass. She smirked, raised the poisoned drink to her lips, and swallowed. And that was when her smile suddenly faded. Before I tell you how a Christmas party turned into a war zone, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect a loved one from a snake inside your own family. My name is Grady. I am 68 years old, and I have spent my entire life hauling heavy loads. Before I was the CEO of King Logistics sitting in a corner office with a view of the Chicago skyline, I was a Marine, and after that I was a truck driver. I know the smell of diesel, the ache of a spine compressed by 12 hours in a driver's seat, and the taste of cheap diner coffee at 3 in the morning. I built my empire one tire rotation at a time, sweating in the summer heat and freezing in the Midwest winters, all to give my family a life I never had. I am a black man who fought his way up from the South Side, demanding respect not with words but with results. But looking around my living room last night, I realized I might have given them too much. The Christmas party was in full swing, a display of excess that I never asked for. My house, a place that used to smell like Esther's collard greens and sweet potato pie, now smelled like imported pine and expensive, suffocating perfume. Harper, my son's wife, had insisted on hiring a catering company. She said Esther's cooking was too heavy, too rustic for the caliber of guests we were inviting. These guests were investors' board members and people who smiled with their teeth but never with their eyes. I stood in the corner holding a glass of sparkling water, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Esther was sitting on the beige sofa, looking uncomfortable in the stiff velvet dress Harper had picked out for her. My wife is a beautiful woman. She has a laugh that can warm a cold room and hands that have held me together when I wanted to break. But tonight she looked small. Her diabetes had been acting up and her heart wasn't what it used to be, leaving her tired and easily confused. Instead of protecting her, my son Tyrell was on the other side of the room, laughing at a joke made by a banker who probably wouldn't have shaken his hand 10 years ago. Tyrell is 32, a CEO in title but a child in spirit. I made the mistake of shielding him from the harshness of the world, and in doing so I created a man who doesn't know how to fight for anything, especially his parents. The music lowered, and I saw Harper clap her hands to gather attention. She stood in the center of the room wearing a shimmering silver gown that cost more than my first truck. She looked radiant, the picture of the perfect hostess, but I knew better. Harper was a shark in sequins. She claimed to be from old money on the East Coast, of Vander Woodson or something similar, but I have been reading people for 50 years. I saw the way her eyes calculated the cost of everything in the room. I saw the way she looked at me and Esther not as family, but as obstacles. Harper walked over to Esther, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. The room went quiet. I moved a few steps closer, my instincts on high alert. Harper placed a hand on Esther's shoulder. It looked affectionate to the guests, but I saw her fingers dig into the fabric. "Everyone, please." "A round of applause for my mother-in-law, Esther Harper," announced her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She insisted on being here tonight despite her condition. Esther looked up confused. "Harper, dear, I feel fine. I just needed to sit down for a moment." Harper laughed, a light tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Mom, you are so brave. And look at this dress. I told Tyrell we should have bought you something new, something that fit the theme, but you insisted on wearing this. It is so vintage. It almost looks like the curtains we took down from the guest room, doesn't it?" A ripple of uncomfortable laughter went through the room. The guests were looking at Esther, analyzing the dark velvet fabric, judging her. Esther touched the collar of her dress, her hand trembling slightly. I thought it was elegant." Esther whispered, her voice barely audible. "It is certainly unique. Harper continued, signaling for a waiter. But do not worry. We love you even when you are a little confused about fashion, or confused about where you are. She was painting a narrative. She was planting the seed in the minds of the shareholders that Esther was losing her mind, that she was unfit, that she was a liability. I looked at Tyrell. My son, the man I raised to stand tall, was looking at his shoes. He took a sip of his drink and said nothing. He let his wife strip his mother of her dignity in front of 50 strangers. That silence from my son hurt more than any bullet I ever took. But pain is fuel. It always has been for me. I set my glass down on a side table and adjusted my cuffs. I was about to walk over there and shut this party down, kick every single one of these vultures out into the snow when I saw it. The waiter brought a tray with 2 glasses of eggnog. Harper took them. She dismissed the waiter with a wave of her hand. She turned her back to the room facing the large Christmas tree, seemingly to admire an ornament. I was standing in the shadows of the hallway entrance just 5 feet away from her oblique angle. She reached into the hidden pocket of her silver gown. Her movement was smooth, practiced. If you blinked, you would have missed it. She pulled out a small blue capsule. She did not hesitate. Her hand hovered over the glass on the left. She popped the capsule open with a flick of her thumb and dumped the powder into the thick, creamy yellow liquid. She dropped the empty shell into her pocket. She picked up a cinnamon stick and gave the drink a quick stir, watching the powder vanish. Time seemed to slow down. I could hear the beat of my own heart, a heavy drum in my chest. That was not sugar. That was not a flavor enhancer. I know Harper. I have seen the way she looks at the quarterly earnings reports. I have seen the way she tracks Esther's doctor appointments. She wanted us out of the way. If Esther had a medical episode tonight right after Harper had primed the crowd to believe she was senile, it would be the end. They would declare Esther incompetent. They would put her in a home. And I would be the angry old husband who couldn't let go. My first instinct was to roar, to grab her wrist and expose her. But I stopped. I am a strategist. If I shouted now, she would drop the glass, she would cry, she would say it was sweetener. She would say I was the crazy one, the aggressive old man attacking his pregnant daughter-in-law, because that was the other lie she had been floating around that she was expecting. Without the evidence, I was just a disruption. No. I needed her to reveal herself. I needed justice, not just a scene. Harper turned back toward Esther, a bright, predatory smile plastered on her face. She held a glass in each hand. The poisoned one was in her left hand. The safe one was in her right. Here, Mom, Harper said, walking towards the sofa. I had the kitchen make this special for you, extra nutmeg just how you like it, to warm your bones. She was about 10 steps away from Esther. I was closer. I stepped out of the shadows. My movement was sudden but controlled. I walked straight into Harper's path, not aggressively but clumsily, like an old man who had lost his footing. "Whoa there!" I boomed, my voice echoing off the high ceilings. I bumped into her shoulder. It was a calculated collision, enough to startle her, but not enough to spill the drinks. Harper gasped and flinched, instinctively pulling the glasses back to save her gown. "Grady, watch." "Where you are going?" She hissed, her mask slipping for a fraction of a second. "I am sorry, Harper," I said, grabbing her arms to steady her. "My knees, you know how they get in this weather. Here, let me help you with those." It happened in a blur. My hands, large and scarred from years of gripping steering wheels and loading crates, covered hers. I stabilized the glasses. And in that chaotic moment of contact, while she was looking down at her dress to check for spills, I did the switch. It was a move I learned playing cards in the barracks 40 years ago. My left hand took the weight of the glass in her right. My right hand guided the glass in her left. I crossed them, a simple weave. Left became right. Right became left. By the time she looked up, annoyed and flustered, the glasses had changed owners, but to the naked eye, nothing had happened. She was still holding 2 glasses of eggnog. "You are so clumsy," she whispered venomously, so only I could hear. "Tyrell is right. You are losing your touch." I released her hands and stepped back, apologizing loudly for the benefit of the room. "My apologies, everyone. Just eager to get to the toast." Harper composed herself. She took a deep breath, fixed her smile, and looked at the glass in her right hand. The glass that was until 2 seconds ago in her left. She did not know. She was so arrogant, so sure of her intellect and my stupidity, that she didn't even consider I could be a threat. She walked the final 3 steps to Esther. "Here, Mom," she said, handing Esther the glass from her left hand. The safe glass. Esther took it, her hands shaking. "Thank you, dear." Harper kept the glass in her right hand. The poisoned glass. I walked over and picked up a glass of champagne from a nearby table. I stood next to Tyrell, who was still looking at the floor. "Make a toast, son," I muttered to him. Tyrell looked up startled. Yes." Everyone. The room went silent again. Harper stood next to Esther, beaming like a guardian angel. She raised the glass of eggnog high. "To family," Harper said, her voice ringing clear. "To transitions, and to knowing when it is time to rest." She looked directly at Esther as she said it. It was a cruel, double-meaning toast. She was toasting to her own victory to the end of Esther's reign as the matriarch. "To family," the guests murmured. I raised my glass. "To the truth," I said, my voice deep and steady. "May it always come out." Harper looked at me. Her eyes narrowed, slightly confused by my tone, but she dismissed it. She brought the glass to her lips. I watched. I did not blink. I watched the creamy liquid touch her lips. I watched her throat move as she swallowed a large gulp. She lowered the glass, licking a bit of foam from her lip, looking satisfied. She thought she had just won. She thought she had just erased my wife. But as the liquid settled in her stomach, I saw a flicker of confusion cross her face. She frowned slightly, touching her chest. The drug she had used was potent. It wasn't meant to kill, but to cause immediate severe disorientation and hallucinations. It hit the bloodstream fast. Harper shook her head as if trying to clear water from her ears. She looked at the guests, and her smile began to waver. She looked at the chandelier, and her eyes widened. I took a sip of my champagne. The show was about to start. Harper looked at me again. This time there was no arrogance in her eyes. There was fear, because she saw me smiling. And it wasn't the polite smile of a father-in-law. It was the smile of a Marine who had just watched the enemy walk into a trap. "Is it warm in here?" Harper asked, her voice trembling. "Why? Why are the lights melting?" She dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor, exploding into a creamy puddle. And then she screamed. The scream that tore through the living room was not human. It was the sound of a trapped animal realizing the cage door had locked. Harper fell to her knees in the middle of the spilled eggnog. The creamy liquid soaked into the hem of her silver gown, turning the expensive fabric into a heavy, stained mess. The guests, who just moments ago were holding crystal flutes and discussing stock options, recoiled in a collective wave of horror. I stood perfectly still. My hand tightened around the stem of my champagne glass, but I did not drink. I watched. This was the moment the mask fell off. Harper began to scratch at her neck. Her perfectly manicured nails, usually painted a soft, demure pink, became weapons. She clawed at her skin as if something was crawling beneath the surface. Red welts rose instantly against her pale complexion. "Get them off me!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. Her eyes were wide pupils dilated so large they swallowed the blue irises completely. "Spiders! There are spiders in the silk!" She ripped at the bodice of her gown. The sound of tearing silk was sharp and violent in the sudden silence of the room. A pearl button popped off and rolled across the marble floor, coming to a stop at the polished shoe of Mr. Henderson, my biggest investor. Harper looked up at him. She did not see a wealthy banker. In her drug-induced delirium, she saw a monster. She scrambled backward, crab-walking across the slick floor. Her movements were erratic and jerky. The drug was hitting her central nervous system with the force of a freight train. I knew the effects of what she had bought. It stripped away reality and replaced it with paranoia. It stripped away the filter that kept civilized people from saying what they truly thought. Tyrell finally snapped out of his shock. He dropped his drink and rushed toward her. "Harper, baby, what is wrong?" He reached out to grab her shoulders, trying to stop her from tearing her own skin. "Do not touch me," she screamed. She flailed her arms, striking him across the face. Tyrell stumbled back, holding his cheek. The room gasped. This was not a medical emergency to them anymore. This was a scandal. This was the breakdown of the King family dynasty happening in real time. Harper pulled herself up using the edge of the buffet table. Silver platters of hors d'oeuvres crashed to the ground. Shrimp and caviar splattered onto the Persian rug. She stood there breathing heavily, her hair a wild tangle around her face. She looked around the room, her eyes darting from face to face. The hallucination seemed to shift. The fear in her eyes turned into pure, unadulterated hatred. The drug had dissolved her inhibitions. The polite, charming daughter-in-law was gone. The real Harper was standing there and she was ugly. She pointed a shaking finger at Mr. Henderson. "I know you are laughing at me," she hissed. "You think you are better than me because you have old money, but you are just a vulture, a fat, greedy vulture waiting for this old man to die." Mr. Henderson turned purple. He looked at me, then back at the deranged woman. "Grady, what is the meaning of this?" he demanded. I said nothing. I let her continue. I needed them to hear it. Harper turned her gaze to the other guests. She laughed a sound that was jagged and broken. "Look at you all, pretending to accept them, pretending you do not notice the smell." She was not talking about the food. The room went deadly quiet. The racial tension that always simmered beneath the surface of these high society gatherings suddenly boiled over. Harper looked directly at my wife Esther. Esther was clinging to the sofa armrest, tears streaming down her face, terrified for the girl she thought she loved. "Stop looking at me like that, you old witch!" Harper spat. She took a step toward Esther. "I am the only reason this family has any class. I am the only thing making you look like human beings instead of help," Tyrell roared. It was the first time in years I had heard my son raise his voice in anger. He lunged forward and grabbed Harper from behind, wrapping his arms around her waist to restrain her. "Harper, stop it. You are sick. You do not know what you are saying." But she knew. The drug made her hallucinate spiders, but it did not put the racism in her heart that had been there all along. It just gave her the permission to let it out. She fought him with surprising strength. She thrashed in his arms, her heels kicking at his shins. "Get your dirty hands off me," she screamed. She threw her head back, slamming it into Tyrell's nose. I heard the crunch of cartilage. Tyrell groaned but did not let go. He was trying to save her dignity, trying to drag her out of the room before she destroyed everything. But it was too late. "Let me go," she howled. Then she did the unthinkable. As Tyrell tried to cover her mouth with his hand to silence the stream of obscenities, Harper clamped her jaws down. She bit him. She bit him hard. Tyrell yelled in pain and jerked his hand back. Blood welled up on the fleshy part of his palm. He looked at his hand, then at his wife in total disbelief. The physical violence broke the spell. The guests began to back away, reaching for their coats, whispering frantically. Phones were out. I saw the flashes of cameras. By morning, this would be on every gossip blog in Chicago. "You are animals!" Harper screamed, stumbling back toward the Christmas tree. "All of you! I am the victim here. He tried to poison me." She pointed a trembling finger at me, but nobody was looking at me. They were looking at the woman with blood on her mouth, standing amidst the wreckage of a Christmas party, shouting slurs at the people who had welcomed her into their home. I stepped forward then. I walked past the shocked investors. I walked past my bleeding son. I stood in front of Esther, shielding her from the sight of the woman she had treated like a daughter. "Call 911, I said calmly to the nearest waiter. "Tell them we have a guest suffering from a severe psychotic break." Harper lunged at me, grabbing a glass ornament from the tree. She raised it to strike, but her legs finally gave out. The drug overwhelmed her motor functions. She collapsed onto the floor, weeping hysterically, curling into a fetal position. She muttered about the spiders again, scratching at the expensive hardwood floor until her nails broke. Tyrell stood over her, cradling his bleeding hand. He looked at me. His eyes were filled with confusion and a desperate plea for me to fix it. "Daddy," he whispered. "Help her!" I looked at him coldly. I did not move. "You better go pack a bag for the hospital, son," I said. "She is going to need a lawyer more than a doctor." The next 10 minutes were a blur of flashing lights and static from police radios. The paramedics arrived quickly. They were professional, but even they looked disturbed by the scene. Harper was still screaming as they strapped her to the gurney. She spit at a female paramedic. They had to sedate her right there in my living room. I watched as they wheeled her out. The festive red and green lights of the Christmas tree reflected off the plastic restraints on her wrists. It was a poetic image. The gift she had meant for Esther was now wrapped around her own life. Tyrell followed the gurney looking like a ghost. He paused at the door and looked back at us. He wanted to say something. He wanted to ask why I was so calm. But he saw the look on my face and swallowed his words. He walked out into the cold Chicago night, the door closing behind him with a heavy thud. The house fell silent. The guests had fled as soon as the ambulance arrived, leaving behind half-eaten food and whispered judgments. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and Esther's soft sobbing. I turned to my wife. She was shaking her hands, clutching the velvet fabric of her dress. She looked old. The trauma of the night had aged her 10 years in 10 minutes. I sat down beside her and took her hand in mine. Her skin was cold. "Grady," she whispered. "What happened? What got into her?" I did not tell her the truth yet. I did not tell her that the woman she loved had tried to turn her brain into mush. Esther was not strong enough for that tonight. "She is sick, Esther," I said softly, rubbing her knuckles with my thumb. "She has been sick for a long time. We just didn't see the symptoms." I looked at the spilled eggnog on the floor. A servant was already moving to clean it up. "Leave it," I ordered. The servant stopped, looking confused. "Leave it," I repeated. "I want the police to take samples." I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the ambulance lights faded into the distance. Tyrell was gone. Harper was gone. The first battle was won, but the war had just begun. Harper was a con artist. When she woke up, she would spin a story. She would play the victim. She would say I drugged her. And Tyrell, my foolish, blind son, would believe her because he couldn't handle the truth that he married a monster. I took out my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Hello, Saul," I said. "Grady," the voice answered. "It is Christmas Eve. This better be good." "It is not good, Saul," I said, watching the snow fall on the driveway. "But it is going to be expensive. I need you to find out who Harper really is, and I need you to start the paperwork to freeze Tyrell's access to the company accounts." There was a pause on the other end. "You are going to war with your own son, Grady." I looked at my reflection in the glass. I looked tired, but my eyes were clear. "I do not have a son right now, Saul," I said. "I have a liability, and I need to cut it loose before it sinks the whole ship." I hung up the phone. I turned back to Esther, who was staring at the Christmas tree. I walked over and kissed her on the forehead. "Go upstairs and rest, old girl," I said. "I will clean up this mess. I always clean up the mess. But this time I wasn't just sweeping up broken glass. I was sweeping out the trash. And I knew with a certainty that chilled my bones that Harper would not go down without dragging us through hell first. Let her try. I was a Marine. I knew how to survive in hell. She was just a tourist. The fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room hummed with a sound that drilled straight into my skull. It was a stark, sterile contrast to the warm, deceitful glow of my living room chandelier. The air here smelled of antiseptic and cheap coffee, a scent that usually reminded me of early mornings on the road, but tonight it just smelled like tragedy. Esther sat in a plastic orange chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked small and gray, her vibrant spirit crushed not by the medical emergency, but by the venomous words Harper had spewed before collapsing. I wanted to comfort her, but my attention was fixed on the man pacing back and forth in front of the vending machine. Tyrell had not sat down once since we arrived. He was not asking the nurses for updates on his wife. He was not holding his mother's hand. He was on his phone scrolling frantically through social media feeds, his thumb moving like a windshield wiper in a storm. I could hear him muttering to himself, cursing under his breath every time the screen refreshed. I stood up and walked over to him. My knees popped, a reminder of my age and the hours I had spent standing guard over my family. "Son," I said, keeping my voice low. "Sit down. You are making your mother nervous." Tyrell stopped. He turned to look at me, and for the first time that night I saw the full extent of the damage Harper had done to his mind. His eyes were red, not from tears of worry, but from the fire of misplaced anger. He shoved his phone into my face. The screen was bright, showing a blurry video of Harper screaming about spiders. It had already been viewed 50,000 times. "Look at this." Tyrell spat, his voice trembling with rage. "Do you see this, Dad? It is trending. My wife is trending in Chicago, not for her charity work, not for the baby she is carrying, but because she looked like a lunatic in my parents' house." He pulled the phone back and ran a hand through his hair, disheveling it. "I have investors texting me," he continued, his voice rising. "The board is emailing me. They are asking if she is on drugs. They are asking if she is unstable. Do you know what this does to the merger deal? Do you have any idea how much money we just lost in the last hour?" I looked at him, feeling a cold pit form in my stomach. "Harper is lying in a hospital bed, Tyrell. The doctors are trying to figure out what happened to her brain, and you are worried about the merger." Tyrell laughed, a short, bitter bark. "Do not act like you care about her. I saw the way you looked at her tonight. You and Mom. You have never liked her. You never accepted her because she is white. You think I do not see it, but I do. You wanted this to happen." I stiffened. I had expected confusion. I had expected grief. I had not expected this. "We love you, Tyrell," I said, my voice hardening. "We have tried to welcome her, but tonight she insulted your mother. She destroyed our home. That was not us. That was her." "No," Tyrell shouted, causing a passing nurse to glare at us. "Harper is perfect. She is elegant and kind, and she loves me. She was fine until she drank that toast. She was perfectly fine until she drank what you gave her." He took a step closer to me, invading my personal space. He was tall, almost as tall as me now, but he lacked the foundation I had built my life on. He was swaying, unmoored by his own panic. "What was in that glass, Dad?" He whispered, the accusation hanging heavy in the air. I stared at him. The irony was so thick it nearly choked me. I had saved his mother. I had saved the company from a hostile takeover by a woman who viewed us as stepping stones. And my reward was my own son looking at me like I was a murderer. "I did not put anything in that glass," I said, holding his gaze. "But someone did." "Yeah," Tyrell sneered. "Maybe Mom did. Maybe she is so jealous of Harper's youth and Harper's baby that she decided to spike her drink with some of her old heart medication. Or maybe you did it to protect Mom's feelings." Esther made a small, wounded sound from her chair. That sound broke my heart more than Tyrell's words. I stepped between Tyrell and Esther, my chest expanding. "You will not speak about your mother that way," I growled. "Not while I am breathing." Tyrell backed down slightly, realizing he had crossed a line, but the resentment in his eyes did not fade. He turned his back on us and walked to the window, staring out at the parking lot. We stood there in silence, a family divided by a glass wall of lies, waiting for the doctor to tell us what we already knew. 40 minutes later, a doctor with tired eyes emerged from the double doors. He held a clipboard and looked at Tyrell. "Mr. King," he said, "your wife is awake. She is stable, but she is very confused and emotionally fragile. The toxicology report is still pending, but clinically it looks like a severe reaction to a stimulant or a hallucinogen." Tyrell pushed past me without a word and rushed through the doors. The doctor looked at me and Esther. "Family can come in," he said, "but please keep it calm. Her heart rate is still erratic." I helped Esther up. She leaned heavily on my arm. We walked down the hallway, the sound of our footsteps echoing on the tile. I knew we were walking into a trap. I knew Harper was awake, and I knew her mind, however scrambled it might be, was already spinning a web. But I had to see it. I had to see the face of the enemy when she realized she was still alive. The hospital room was dimly lit. Machines beeped rhythmically next to the bed. Harper lay there looking small and pale against the white sheets. Her blonde hair was matted with sweat and her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked like a broken doll. It was a convincing image. If I hadn't seen her drop that pill with the precision of a sniper, I might have felt sorry for her. Tyrell was kneeling by the bed, holding her hand and weeping. "Oh, baby, I am so sorry," he sobbed. "I am here. I am not going anywhere." Harper turned her head slowly. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on me. For a second, I saw the flash of recognition. I saw the memory of the swap. She knew. She knew exactly what I had done. But then the mask slid back into place. She let out a whimper and pulled her hand away from Tyrell, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Him," she croaked, her voice raspy. Tyrell looked up. "What is it, Harper? What about Dad? Get him away from me," she cried, tears instantly spilling from her eyes. "I saw him. Tyrell, I saw him by the drinks." The room went cold. A police officer who had been standing quietly in the corner taking a statement looked up from his notepad. He was a young officer, eager and serious. He stepped forward. "Ma'am, what did you see?" the officer asked. Harper began to hyperventilate. The monitor beside her beeped faster, adding urgency to her performance. "I was fixing my dress," she gasped, looking at the officer with wide, terrified eyes. I looked in the reflection of the window. I saw him. Grady. He was standing over the tray. He put something in the glass. I thought maybe it was just sugar. I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to be rude. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing loudly. "He tried to kill me," she wailed. "He tried to kill our baby because he hates me." Tyrell stood up slowly. He turned to face me. His face was a mask of horror and betrayal. The doubt he had earlier was gone, replaced by the conviction of a husband defending his wife. "You," Tyrell whispered. "You actually did it." I stood my ground. I did not fidget. I did not look away. She is lying, Tyrell, I said calmly. She is a con artist, and she is lying to cover her own tracks. Liar, Harper screamed from the bed. Why would I poison myself? Why would I hurt my own baby? You are the monster, you and your jealous wife. The police officer stepped between me and Tyrell. He placed a hand on his belt, not drawing his weapon, but asserting his authority. Sir, the officer said to me, his voice firm, I am going to need you to step out into the hallway. We need to ask you some questions. I looked at the officer. I saw the way he looked at me. He saw a big, angry black man. He saw a weeping, petite white woman in a hospital bed. He saw a wealthy husband pointing the finger at his father. The narrative was already being written in his head. It was a story as old as America, the victimhood of the innocent white woman against the aggression of the black man. Harper knew this. She played this card because she knew it was the trump card. I looked at Esther. She was trembling, her hand covering her mouth in shock. It is okay, Esther, I said softly. Stay with Tyrell. I turned to the officer. I have nothing to hide, officer, I said. I will answer your questions. But you should check her purse. You might find the wrapper of whatever she took. Harper shrieked again. He is trying to frame me. Tyrell, make him stop. Tyrell lunged at me, grabbing my lapels. You stay away from her, he yelled, shaking me. If anything happens to this baby, I will kill you myself. I swear to God, I will kill you. The officer grabbed Tyrell and pulled him back. Sir, calm down, or I will have to detain you too. I smoothed my jacket. I looked at my son one last time. He was lost. He was drowning in her lies, and he was dragging our entire legacy down with him. I walked out into the hallway, the officer following close behind. As the door closed, I heard Harper's sobs turn into a soft, steady rhythm. She had won this round. She had turned my son against me and placed me under suspicion. But she had made one critical mistake. She thought this was a sprint. She thought she could knock me out in one night. She didn't know I was built for marathons. I leaned against the cold hospital wall and watched the officer click his pen. Name, the officer asked. Grady King, I said, and relation to the victim. I looked at the closed door. I am her father-in-law, I said, and she is not a victim. She is the perpetrator. The officer smirked clearly, not believing a word I said. We will see about that, Mr. King. We will see about that. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I needed Saul. I needed evidence, and I needed to make sure that when Harper's house of cards finally fell, my son wasn't standing underneath it. But for now, I was alone, a suspect in a crime. I stopped accused by the woman who committed it. It was going to be a long Christmas. The sound of the zipper closing on the Louis Vuitton duffel bag was the loudest thing in the house. It was a sharp final sound, like a guillotine blade dropping. Tyrell did not look at me. He moved around his childhood bedroom with a frantic energy, throwing designer suits and silk ties into the bag. He was stripping the room of his presence, erasing himself from the house that built him. I stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching my son turn into a stranger. You are making a mistake, Tyrell, I said, my voice low and steady. You are running away from the truth. Tyrell stopped, but he did not turn around. He gripped the handle of the bag until his knuckles turned white. I am running away from toxicity, he said, his voice muffled by the wall. I am protecting my wife and my unborn child from you. You are dangerous, Dad. I see that now. Harper was right. You have always been jealous of my success. You have always wanted to control me. I almost laughed, jealous of his success. I gave him that success. I built the ladder he climbed. I held it steady while he went up rung by rung. But I said nothing. Arguing with a man under a spell is useless. You have to break the spell first. He walked past me, bumping my shoulder hard. He marched down the stairs, his heavy footsteps echoing on the hardwood. I followed him to the front door. The winter wind howled outside, waiting to swallow him up. I am cutting off the negativity, Tyrell said, turning to face me one last time. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth I had seen in them since he was a baby. Do not try to call us. Do not try to visit the hospital. If you come near Harper again, I will file a restraining order. The door slammed shut, the house shook, and then there was silence. But the silence did not last long. Reality has a way of crashing in when you least expect it. An hour later, I was at the 24-hour pharmacy down on State Street. Esther needed her heart medication. The stress of the evening had caused her palpitations to return, and I needed to get her beta blockers immediately. The pharmacist was a young woman I knew well. She smiled when she saw me. Rough night, Mr. King, she asked, scanning the bottle. You have no idea, Brenda, I said, swiping my black American Express card. The machine beeped. A nasty, harsh sound. Declined. I frowned. That card had a limit high enough to buy this entire building. Try it again, please, I said. It must be the chip. She swiped it again. Beep. Declined. I felt a cold sweat prickle on the back of my neck. It was not embarrassment. I am too old to be embarrassed by money. It was a realization, a tactical understanding of the enemy move. I pulled out my debit card, the one linked to the family trust, the trust I had set up to ensure my children and grandchildren would never know hunger. Beep. Declined. Please contact your financial institution. I stared at the little screen. The numbers blurred. Tyrell. He had not just packed his bags. He had gone into the joint accounts, the accounts he had access to as the current acting CEO and trustee, and he had frozen them. He had locked me out of my own fortune. He had cut off the supply line. I looked at Brenda. Her smile was gone, replaced by pity. I hate pity. I dug into my pocket. I pulled out a crumpled wad of cash I kept for emergencies. It was a habit from my trucking days. You never know when you need to bribe a mechanic or pay a toll. I counted out $80. It was enough for the pills. Keep the change, Brenda, I said, my voice flat. I walked out into the cold night, clutching the small paper bag. The wind bit at my face, but I did not feel it. I felt the heat of anger. Tyrell thought this would break me. He thought that by taking away the plastic cards and the bank numbers, he could make me powerless. He forgot who I was. He forgot that I was poor for 40 years before I was rich for 20. He forgot that I know how to survive on nothing but grit and a tire iron. He had just declared war, and he had made the mistake of thinking money was the only weapon I had. I drove home in silence. I gave Esther her medicine and watched her drift into a fitful sleep. Then I went downstairs to my study. This room was my sanctuary. It smelled of old leather and pipe tobacco. On the wall hung a framed photo of my first truck, a rusted, beat-up rig that I loved more than any luxury car. Next to it was a photo of my platoon in Vietnam. I looked at the young men in that photo. Most of them were dead. I was still here. I sat down at my heavy oak desk. I did not turn on the computer. I did not check the bank accounts. I knew they were dead. Instead, I opened the bottom drawer. Underneath a stack of tax returns lay a small black book. It was old. The spine was cracked. I hadn't opened it in 15 years. I flipped through the pages until I found the number. Saul Berkowitz. Saul was not just a lawyer, he was a pit bull in a suit. We had met in the 80s when the unions were corrupt and the mob was trying to muscle in on my shipping routes. Saul was the one who told me which judges could be bought and which ones needed to be scared. He was the one who helped me bury the bodies, not literally but legally, of everyone who tried to take my company. It was 2 a.m. I dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. Grady, Saul said. His voice sounded like gravel in a mixer. I saw the news. Your daughter-in-law is trending on Twitter. She looks like she is possessed. She is not possessed, Saul, I said, leaning back in my chair. She is a professional, and she just froze my accounts. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. The kid has guts. Stupid guts, but guts. I need you to work, Saul, I said. And I do not mean writing briefs. I need the old work. I heard the sound of a lighter clicking on the other end. Saul was lighting a cigar. I could almost smell the smoke through the phone. I am listening, Grady. I want a deep dive on Harper, I said. Not the background check HR did. That was surface level. She is too good. The way she palmed that pill. The way she switched the narrative. She has done this before. You do not learn that in debutante school. You learn that on the street. I want to know where she was born. Saul continued, his voice sharp. I want to know her real name. I want to know who she dated in college. I want to know if she has a record in any state under any alias. Exactly, I said. And check the drug. She used something strong, something that hits fast. Find out where a girl like that gets a controlled substance. Check the dark web. Check the local dealers. I want to know the supply chain. You think she bought it locally? Saul asked. I think she is arrogant, I replied. She thinks she is smarter than us. She leaves breadcrumbs because she doesn't think we are looking down. I will put the investigator on it tonight, Saul said. The guy I use is ex-Mossad. If she so much as stole a candy bar in kindergarten, he will find the wrapper. And Saul, I added, my voice dropping an octave. Check the pregnancy. There was a silence on the line. You think she is faking it? Saul asked. I think a woman who poisons her mother-in-law doesn't have a maternal bone in her body, I said. Find me the medical records. If there is no baby, there is no heir. If there is no heir, she loses her leverage over Tyrell. Done, Saul said. But Grady, what are you going to do about the money? You cannot fight a legal battle with empty pockets. I looked at the photo of my first truck again. I remembered the nights I slept in the cab with a baseball bat across my chest because the cargo was worth more than my life. I have cash buried in the backyard, Saul. I lied. I always keep a reserve. Just get me the dirt. I will handle the finance. I hung up the phone. I did not have cash in the backyard. I had something better. I had the ledger. I pulled a thick, dusty binder from the shelf. These were the contacts of every favor I was owed, every mechanic I had helped, every small business owner I had loaned money to when the bank said no, every dock worker whose family I had supported during the strikes. Tyrell thought power came from a bank account. He was about to learn that power comes from loyalty. He had cut off my money, but he could not cut off my history. I opened the binder and ran my finger down the list of names. Tomorrow, I would not go to the bank. I would go to the streets. I would go to the South Side. I would call in the debts, and I would build a war chest that no credit freeze could touch. Harper wanted to play the victim. She wanted to play the innocent white girl attacked by the angry black family. Fine, I would let her play her role. But she forgot one thing. In this story, I am not the villain. I am the nightmare she wakes up to when the drugs wear off. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark, letting the anger sharpen my mind. The hunt was on, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. The heater in Saul's vintage Lincoln Town Car rattled like a dying lung as we rolled into the South Side neighborhood. This was not the Gold Coast where Harper claimed to have spent her childhood riding horses and attending garden parties. This was the part of Chicago where the streetlights were broken and the snow turned gray the moment it touched the pavement. I sat in the passenger seat staring out the window at the boarded-up storefronts and the liquor stores with bars on the windows. According to the employment records Harper had given my human resources department, this was the address of her family estate. She had listed it as a historic brownstone. We pulled up to the curb and the engine sputtered into silence. I looked out the window and I felt a cold, hard laugh build in my chest. There was no brownstone. There was no estate. There was only a crumbling strip mall with a laundromat, a check cashing place, and a private mailbox center called the Mail Drop. Saul lit a cigar, the flame illuminating his wrinkled, cynical face. He did not look surprised. He had been a lawyer for 40 years, and he had seen every kind of lie a human being could tell. She never lived here, Grady Saul said, blowing smoke against the windshield. This is a ghost address. It is where you send mail when you do not want anyone to know you sleep in a motel or a shelter. I opened the car door and stepped out into the freezing wind. I needed to see it up close. I walked up to the glass door of the mailbox center. Inside, I saw rows of small metal boxes. Box 404. That was the unit number she had listed as her apartment. Harper, the girl who cried because the thread count on our guest sheets was too low, had been picking up her mail next to a pawn shop. I walked back to the car. Saul handed me a manila folder. It was thick. My investigator found this in 3 hours, Saul said, tapping the file. It turns out Harper Vander Woodson does not exist. The social security number she gave you belongs to a woman who died in 1995. I opened the file. The first thing I saw was a mugshot. It was from 10 years ago, but the eyes were the same. Cold, calculating, blue like ice. But the girl in the picture did not have blonde highlights or a nose job. She had matted brown hair and a bruised cheek. Her name is Kelly O'Connor, Saul said. Her father was a man named Patrick O'Connor, also known as Paddy the Shark. He was a small-time grifter who ran insurance scams in Boston. He died in prison 4 years ago. Kelly learned the trade at his knee. She has been running cons since she was 12. I flipped through the pages. It was a timeline of destruction. A credit card fraud charge in Ohio. A dismissed theft charge in Florida. And then a gap of 3 years where she disappeared completely before resurfacing in Chicago as Harper, the sophisticated art history major who swept my son off his feet. I looked at the picture of her father. He had the same charm in his smile, the same way of tilting his head that Harper used when she wanted something. "She is not just a liar, Saul," I said, closing the file. "She is a legacy. This is a family business for her." Saul nodded. "And she is escalating. Usually she just drains a boyfriend bank account and disappears. But marrying into a family like yours, Grady, that is the retirement plan. That is the big score." I looked back at the strip mall. The contrast made me sick. I thought about the way Harper walked around my house, touching the antiques, criticizing the art. She had played the role of an aristocrat so perfectly that she made us feel like we were the imposters. She made Esther feel small in her own kitchen, all while she came from a background that made my humble beginnings look like royalty. "We need to get this to the police," I said. Saul shook his head. "Not yet. Being a liar is not a crime, Grady. Using a fake name on a resume is not enough to put her away for what she did to Esther. We need proof of the poison, or we need proof of a financial crime so big they cannot ignore it." As if summoned by his words, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a ringtone I rarely heard. It was the direct line to the private wealth division of our bank. I answered it. "Hello, Mr. King." The voice on the other end was tight and professional. "This is Jonathan Sterling from the bank. I am afraid I have some urgent news regarding the collateral on the family trust." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. "What collateral, Jonathan?" "The trust is funded by cash and stocks." There was a pause. The silence on the line was heavy. "Mr. King, we received the paperwork 3 months ago," Mr. Sterling said. "The paperwork authorizing a $5 million loan against the equity of your primary residence. The funds were dispersed into a holding company called HK Ventures. We are calling because the first interest payment was due today and the account is frozen." I stopped breathing. The air left my lungs in a rush. "Repeat," that I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Did you say $5 million against my house?" "Yes, sir," Mr. Sterling replied. "The documents were signed by your wife Esther King and notarized. We have the digital copies right here. Send them to me," I ordered. "Send them now." I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking. Not from fear, but from a rage so hot it could melt the snow on the sidewalk. "What is it?" Saul asked, seeing the look on my face. "She mortgaged my house," I said. "She took out $5 million against the house I built for Esther." My phone pinged. The email had arrived. I opened the attachment. I zoomed in on the signature page. There it was. Esther King. The looping L. The sharp K. It looked exactly like my wife's handwriting. It was perfect. And then I remembered. I remembered a Sunday afternoon 3 months ago. Harper and Esther were at the kitchen table. Harper was laughing, saying she wanted to learn how to write thank you notes with proper etiquette. She was asking Esther to show her how to sign her name with a flourish. "Oh, Mom, your signature is so elegant," Harper had said. "Show me again. I want to practice." I had watched them from the doorway, thinking it was a bonding moment. I thought they were finally connecting. I smiled as I watched my wife teach her future killer how to steal her life. Harper had not been bonding. She had been practicing forgery. She had sat there drinking our tea, eating our food, and learning how to take the roof over our heads. I showed the screen to Saul. He squinted at the tiny screen. "That is a felony," Saul said, his voice low. "That is bank fraud, identity theft, grand larceny. But it is her word against a dead woman or a crazy woman," I said, realizing the trap. "If Esther is declared incompetent, Harper will say Esther signed it willingly but forgot. She will say the money was a gift for the baby," HK Ventures, Saul muttered. "Harper King Ventures. She didn't even try to hide it." "She didn't think she would have to hide it," I said. "She thought Esther would be in a nursing home by now, drooling and mindless. She thought I would be too busy grieving to check the books. And she thought Tyrell would be the CEO, signing off on everything she wanted." I looked up at the gray sky. The snow was falling harder now, covering the grime of the city in a clean white sheet. But nothing could cover the filth I felt right now. My house. The house where I raised my son. The house where I planned to grow old with Esther. Harper had turned it into a poker chip, and she had cashed it in before the game even started. "Drive Saul," I said, gripping the phone until the screen cracked. "Where to?" Saul asked, starting the engine. "To the bank," I said. "I want the original documents. And then we are going to the hospital." "You are going to confront her?" Saul asked, merging into traffic. "No," I said, staring straight ahead. "I am done confronting her. I am going to destroy her. She wants my house. Fine, she can have a cell. It is the only housing I am going to provide for her from now on." The car sped up, heading back toward the skyline of the city where my son was holding the hand of a woman who had just robbed him blind. The $5 million was gone, I knew that. A grifter like Harper would have moved it to an offshore account in seconds. But the money did not matter anymore. This was about survival. If she had taken the money and left, I might have let her go. But she stayed. She tried to take my wife mind. She tried to take my son's soul, and now she wanted the very bricks and mortar that held us together. I closed my eyes and pictured Harper's face, the angel, the mother-to-be. I opened my eyes. "The devil," I whispered. "And tonight, the devil is going to pay her dues." The boardroom of King Logistics is usually a place of noise. It is where I have spent the last 30 years shouting down union reps, negotiating million-dollar contracts, and laughing with men I thought were my friends. But this morning the room was silent as a crypt. The long mahogany table stretched out before me like a dark river. At the far end sat the 12 members of the board. Men and women I had made rich. Men and women who had eaten at my table and held my grandchildren. Today they would not look me in the eye. They shuffled papers and checked their watches, terrified of the drama that was about to unfold. I sat in my usual chair at the head of the table. But it felt different today. It felt like the chair of a defendant, not a chairman. To my right sat Saul. He was the only one who looked comfortable. He was cutting a cigar even though smoking in the building had been banned for a decade. He was letting them know that we did not care about their rules. The double doors opened. The silence in the room deepened, becoming thick and suffocating. Tyrell walked in first. He was wearing a suit that was too tight for him, a trendy cut that Harper had picked out. He looked exhausted. His eyes were shadowed, and he held a thick binder against his chest like a shield. He did not look at me. He walked to the side of the room and stood there waiting. Then came the performance. The doors opened wider and Harper appeared. She was in a wheelchair. I had to suppress a snort of disgust. The woman had walked out of the hospital on her own 2 feet 6 hours ago. I knew because Saul had a tail on her. But here she was, wheeled in by a private nurse playing the invalid to perfection. She wore no makeup. Her skin looked pale and translucent. She wore a soft, oversized cardigan that made her look small and defenseless. She looked like a broken bird. The board members shifted in their seats. I saw the sympathy in their eyes. They saw a young, beautiful white woman who had been victimized. They did not see the viper who had tried to poison my wife. Harper was wheeled to the spot next to Tyrell. She looked up at the board members and gave them a weak, trembling smile. "Thank you for seeing me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know this is highly irregular." Mr. Henderson, the banker who had turned purple at my party, cleared his throat. He looked at me with cold judgment. "It is not irregular, Mrs. King," he said softly. "We are just glad you are safe." Safe. The word hung in the air like a bad joke. Tyrell stepped forward. He placed the binder on the table. "Gentlemen and ladies," Tyrell began, his voice shaking slightly. "We are here today to discuss a sensitive matter, a matter regarding the leadership of this company and the safety of its employees." He paused. He took a breath. I saw him glance at Harper. She gave him a tiny nod, a command. "My father," Tyrell said, pointing at me without looking at me. "Whoa. My father, Grady King, is no longer fit to lead this company." Saul slammed his hand on the table. The sound was like a gunshot. "Objection," Saul growled. "This is a boardroom, not a kangaroo court. You have no grounds, Tyrell." "I do have grounds," Tyrell shouted, his voice cracking. He opened the binder. He pulled out a stack of documents and slid them down the table. "These are medical records," Tyrell said. "From Dr. Aris. Dad has been seeing him for 6 months." I frowned. I had never heard of Dr. Aris. I picked up the paper that slid in front of me. It was a detailed report. It had my name, my date of birth, my social security number, and it had a diagnosis. Early onset dementia with paranoid delusions and intermittent explosive disorder. I read the words. They were typed in neat black ink. The report detailed incidents that never happened, It said I had forgotten where I was during a site visit in July. It said I had accused a secretary of stealing my pens in August. It said I had violent mood swings. This is a forgery. I said, my voice calm but deadly. I have never met this doctor. Tyrell looked at the board, his face twisted in mock sorrow. That is part of the disease, Tyrell said. He forgets. He forgets the appointments. He forgets the outbursts. And last night at the party, his paranoia reached a breaking point. He believed my wife was poisoning his tea. He hallucinated it. And in his confusion, he attacked her. The room gasped. Harper let out a soft sob. She buried her face in a tissue. He switched the glasses. Harper wept, her voice muffled. He was ranting about chemicals. I tried to calm him down. I drank it to show him it was safe. But he had put something in it. He drugged me because he thought I was the enemy. She looked up, her eyes swimming in tears. He is sick, she whispered. He is sick and he is dangerous. Please do not let him hurt anyone else. Do not let him destroy the company he built. Mr. Henderson picked up the report. He looked at me. His eyes were full of pity, and that pity broke something inside me. I did not want their pity. I wanted their respect. Grady. Mr. Henderson said gently, maybe it is time. Maybe you need to rest. Tyrell can take over as interim CEO. We will make sure you get the best care. Care. They were talking about putting me in a home. They were talking about stripping me of my power, my legacy, and my freedom based on a lie printed on letterhead. I looked at Tyrell. He was sweating. He knew this was a lie. He had to know. But he was so desperate to please her, so desperate to be the man in charge, that he was willing to bury his own father alive. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Sit down, Grady, Mr. Henderson said nervously. Please, do not make a scene. I am not making a scene, I said, buttoning my jacket. I am making a defense. I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out the manila envelope Saul had given me. The envelope containing the fruit of our investigation. You want to talk about evidence, I said, my voice booming in the small room. Let us talk about evidence. I opened the envelope. I pulled out a single piece of paper. It was a printout from a dark web server. It showed a transaction, a credit card payment, a delivery address, and a product name. I slid it down the table toward Henderson. This is a receipt, I said, pointing at the paper. It is for a shipment of scopolamine, a drug known as devil's breath. It causes hallucinations, obedience, and amnesia. I looked at Harper. She stopped crying. Her eyes went wide. It was purchased 3 weeks ago, I continued, using a cryptocurrency account linked to an IP address in this building, an IP address that belongs to the guest Wi-Fi network, the same network Harper uses when she visits. I leaned over the table, staring directly at Harper. You bought the poison, I said. You bought it. You had it shipped here. And you used it on yourself when your plan to use it on Esther failed. The room was silent. Henderson looked at the receipt. He looked confused. He looked at Harper. Mrs. King Henderson asked, holding up the paper, Is this true? Did you buy this? This was the moment. This was the checkmate. I had the facts. I had the paper trail. I waited for her to crumble. I waited for Tyrell to realize he was married to a monster. But Harper did not crumble. She did not scream. She did the one thing I did not expect. She looked at the paper, and then she smiled a sad, broken smile. Yes, she whispered. The room erupted. Tyrell looked at her shocked. Harper, what are you saying? Yes, I bought it, she said, her voice gaining strength. But it was not for Esther, and it was not poison. She looked at Tyrell, tears streaming down her face again. Tyrell, you know how much pressure I have been under, she sobbed. The wedding, the new house, the baby. I gained 15 pounds. 15 pounds, Tyrell. You made a comment about my waistline last month, do you remember? Tyrell looked blank. I said you looked healthy. I felt fat. Harper wailed, hitting her own legs. I felt disgusting. I read online that small doses of scopolamine can suppress appetite. It is an old modeling trick. I bought it to lose weight. I bought it because I wanted to be beautiful for you. She turned to the board, opening her arms wide. I am a pregnant woman with body image issues, she cried. I made a stupid mistake. I took a diet pill, and now my father-in-law is using my insecurity to frame me for attempted murder. She broke down completely, shaking and gasping for air. Oh God, Tyrell, she choked out. He hates me so much. He hates that I'm not perfect. He hates that I am having your baby. He went through my internet history. He invaded my privacy. He is obsessed with destroying me. The shift in the room was palpable. It was physical. The board members did not see a poisoner anymore. They saw a woman struggling with the pressure of being a king. They saw a victim of body shaming. They saw a nasty old man digging up dirt on a young mother. Tyrell's face turned red, a deep, violent red. He snatched the receipt from Henderson and ripped it in half. "You investigated her," Tyrell screamed at me. "You hired someone to spy on my wife because she wanted to lose a few pounds." "It is a hallucination drug, Tyrell," I shouted, losing my cool for the first time. "It is not a diet pill. Use your head. Stop it," Tyrell yelled, slamming his fist on the table. "Stop attacking her. Look at her dad. She is in a wheelchair. She is pregnant, and you are treating her like a criminal." He turned to the board. "This proves it," Tyrell said, panting. "This proves his paranoia. He takes a receipt for diet supplements and turns it into an assassination plot. He is sick. He needs help, and he needs to be removed from this building immediately." Henderson looked at me. He looked disappointed. He looked sad. Grady Henderson said quietly, "I think you should go." I looked around the room. I saw the faces of men I had known for decades. They were looking down. They were looking away. They had made their choice. They chose the youth. They chose the tears. They chose the lie because it was easier to swallow than the truth. I looked at Harper. She was still burying her face in her hands, but I saw her eyes through her fingers. They were dry, and they were laughing. She had taken my evidence and turned it into a weapon against me. She had used her own vanity as a shield. It was brilliant. It was evil. And it worked. I closed my briefcase. The click of the latches sounded like the closing of a coffin. I picked up the torn pieces of the receipt. I put them in my pocket. "You are making a mistake," I said to the room. "You are handing the keys of the kingdom to a wolf, and when she is done eating me, she is going to eat you." I looked at Tyrell. "You are not protecting your wife, son," I said softly. "You are feeding the thing that is going to kill you." "Get out," Tyrell whispered. "Just get out." I turned and walked to the door. I walked tall. I did not limp. I did not look back. I walked out of the building I built. I walked past the security guards who refused to make eye contact. I walked out into the cold, gray afternoon. Saul was waiting by the car. He saw my face. He threw his cigar into a puddle. "They didn't buy it?" Saul asked. I shook my head. "She spun it," I said. "She said it was for weight loss." Saul cursed, a long string of words in Yiddish. "She is good," Saul said, opening the door for me. "She is better than good," I said, climbing into the back seat. "She is world class." I leaned my head back against the leather seat. I felt tired. My bones ached. I had lost the company. I had lost my house. I had lost my son. But as the car pulled away, I felt something else. A cold clarity. I had lost the battle. But the war was not over. Harper had played her hand. She had used the dementia card. She had used the pregnancy card. She had used the victim card. She was running out of cards. And I still had the one thing she didn't know about. I had the truth about the baby. "Take me to the warehouse, Saul," I said, closing my eyes. "The warehouse," Saul asked. "We have an office there, but it is freezing." "I know," I said, "but it is the only place she cannot reach. And tonight I have some trash to dig through." The car turned corner. I was down, but I was not out. And Harper was about to learn that you never corner a truck driver. We always have a tire iron under the seat. The silence in my house that evening was heavy enough to crush a man. The fire in the hearth had died down to glowing embers casting long, dancing shadows across the living room. Esther sat in her armchair staring at a spot on the carpet. She had not spoken to me since I returned from the office without my title. I knew what she was thinking. She was thinking that I had gone too far. She was thinking that my pride had finally destroyed our family. I wanted to tell her that I did it for her. I wanted to tell her that the wolf was at the door and I was the only one holding the latch. But before I could say a word, the doorbell rang. It was not a hesitant ring. It was long and demanding. I stood up, my joints popping in the quiet room. I walked to the door and opened it. Tyrell stood there. The snow was falling on his expensive wool coat. Beside him stood Harper. She was not in the wheelchair anymore, but she was leaning on him heavily, looking pale and fragile. "We need to talk," Tyrell said. His voice was not angry anymore. It was tired. I stepped back to let them in. I did not want them in my house, but I saw Esther stand up. Her eyes lit up with a desperate hope. She wanted peace. She wanted her son back. Harper walked into the living room and hesitated. She looked at Esther and then she looked at the floor. "Mom," Harper whispered, "I am so sorry about everything. I never wanted this to happen. The stress, the medication. It made me crazy." Esther walked over to her. She did not hug her, but she did not push her away. She just looked at her with sadness. "Why are you here, Harper?" I asked, remaining by the door. "You won at the board meeting. You took my company. What more do you want?" Harper looked up at me. Her eyes were wide and filled with tears. "I do not want your company, Grady," she said. "I want my child to have a grandfather." The room went still. Esther gasped. She brought her hands to her mouth. "Child," Esther whispered. Harper nodded. She placed a hand on her flat stomach. She looked down at it with a reverence that would have fooled the Pope. "I am 12 weeks along," she said softly. "That is why I was taking the supplements. That is why I was so emotional. I wanted to be perfect for the baby, for the heir of the King family." Esther let out a cry of pure joy. It was a sound I had not heard in years. It was the sound of a woman who had given up on the future, suddenly having it placed in her hands. She rushed forward and wrapped her arms around Harper. "Oh my God," Esther sobbed. "A baby, a grandbaby." "Tyrell, why didn't you tell us?" "We wanted it to be a surprise," Tyrell said, smiling weakly. "We wanted to tell you at Christmas, but after everything that happened, we couldn't let this feud go on. I watched them. I watched my wife holding the woman who had tried to kill her. I watched my son smiling at the woman who was robbing him. It was a perfect scene, a beautiful family reconciliation, and it was all a lie. She is lying, Esther," I said, my voice cutting through the warmth like a blade. Esther pulled away from Harper. She turned to look at me. Her face was wet with tears, but her eyes were hard. "Stop it, Grady," she said. "She is not pregnant," I said, walking into the room. "She is buying time. She knows I am investigating her. She knows I am close to the truth. So she invented a baby to use as a human shield." Harper buried her face in Tyrell's chest and began to sob. "See, Tyrell," Harper cried. "He hates me. He hates our child. He will never stop." Tyrell glared at me. "Dad, that is enough. You have lost. Just accept it. We are having a baby. If you cannot be happy for us, then stay away from us." I looked at Esther. I pleaded with her with my eyes. I needed her to trust me. I needed her to remember the woman who tried to drug her. "Esther, look at me," I said. "This is a trick. Do not let her manipulate you with a dream." Esther walked up to me. She stood barely 5 feet tall, but in that moment she looked like a giant. She poked me in the chest with her finger. "You listen to me, Grady King," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I have buried parents. I have buried siblings. I have lived my whole life waiting to hold a grandchild. I do not care about your investigations. I do not care about your paranoia. If there is a 1% chance that she is carrying my blood, you will not touch her." "But she is dangerous," I said. "She is family," Esther screamed. "And if you do anything to stress her out, if you do anything to endanger that baby, I will never forgive you. I will leave you, Grady. I swear it." The threat hung in the air. I looked at my wife. I saw the desperation in her soul. Harper had found the one thing Esther valued more than her own life: a legacy. I looked at Harper. Over Esther's shoulder, she met my gaze. She did not smile this time. She just stared at me blankly. It was the stare of a predator who knows the prey is trapped. "Fine," I said quietly. "I will leave her alone." "Thank you," Esther said, collapsing into a chair. I walked to the hallway closet. I put on my coat. I put on my hat. "Where are you going?" Esther asked. "I am going for a walk," I said. "I need some air." I opened the door and walked out into the night. Behind me, I heard the sounds of my family celebrating a lie. I heard the clinking of glasses. I heard the laughter. It made my stomach turn. I did not go for a walk. I went to my truck. I drove through the city streets, my hands gripping the steering wheel until they ached. The snow had turned to slush gray and ugly. I drove to the suburb where Tyrell lived. It was a gated community, a place where people locked their doors to keep out the reality of the world. I knew the gate code. I paid for the gate code. I parked the truck 3 blocks away from their house. I did not want them to see the headlights. I walked the rest of the way. The wind cut through my coat, but I did not feel it. I felt only the cold resolve of a man who has nothing left to lose. I reached their house. It was dark. They were still at my place celebrating their victory. That was good. That gave me time. I walked around to the side of the house, the garage area. That was where they kept the trash bins. 3 large plastic bins lined up against the brick wall. I stood there for a moment looking at the bins. I was the former CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. I was a respected member of the community. And here I was standing in the freezing cold about to dig through garbage like a raccoon. But dignity is a luxury for men who are winning. I was losing. So I lifted the lid of the first bin. It was empty. I lifted the lid of the second bin. Recycling. Wine bottles, dozens of them. Tyrell had been drinking a lot lately. Or maybe Harper had. Pregnant women do not drink wine. I made a mental note of that. I opened the third bin. General waste. The smell hit me. Rotting food. Coffee grounds. The stale odor of a household. I pulled out a small flashlight from my pocket. I clicked it on, holding it in my mouth so I could use both hands. I began to dig. I moved aside a bag of kitchen scraps. I moved aside a pile of junk mail. I was looking for something specific. I did not know what it was yet, but I knew that people are careless with their trash. They think that once it is in the bag, it disappears. They forget that the trash is a diary of their lives. I found a bag from the master bathroom. It was small, tied with a delicate knot. I ripped it open. Cotton balls stained with makeup remover, empty toilet paper rolls, a box for a pregnancy test. My heart skipped a beat. I pulled the box out. It was empty. I dug deeper, looking for the stick. If I could find the stick, I could prove the result. But the stick was gone. She must have disposed of it somewhere else. Smart. I kept digging. My hands were freezing. The gloves I wore were thin. I sifted through used tissues and dental floss. And then I saw it. It was buried at the bottom of the bag, wrapped inside a wad of tissue paper, a flash of blue plastic. I pulled it out. I unfolded the tissue. It was a wrapper, a small blue wrapper. I recognized the brand. I had lived with a wife for 40 years. I knew what feminine hygiene products looked like. This was a wrapper for a tampon. But a wrapper proves nothing. A wrapper could be old. It could be from months ago. I shone the flashlight deeper into the wad of tissue. There it was, the used product. I will not describe it. I do not need to. But it was fresh. The blood was red, not brown. It had not been there for days. It had been placed there today. Maybe this morning. Maybe right before she came to my house to tell my wife she was pregnant. I stood there in the darkness, holding the evidence of her betrayal. My breath came out in white clouds. She was menstruating. You cannot be pregnant and have a period like this. It is biologically impossible. Harper was not carrying an heir. She was carrying a curse. I took a clear plastic evidence bag from my pocket. I always carried them now since the investigation started. I dropped the wrapper and the tissue inside. I sealed it. I looked at the house. It looked so peaceful, so perfect. But inside it was built on a foundation of lies. She had looked my wife in the eye. She had let Esther cry tears of joy. She had let Esther plan a future for a child that did not exist. That was a cruelty that went beyond greed. That was evil. I put the bag in my inside pocket next to my heart. It felt heavy. I closed the bin lid. I walked back to my truck. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the dashboard. I was alone. My wife thought I was a monster. My son thought I was a paranoid old man. The board of directors thought I was senile, but I had the truth in my pocket. I started the engine. The heater roared to life. "I am coming for you, Harper," I whispered to the empty cab. "You played the pregnancy card. You went all in. But you forgot one thing. You can lie to the world. You can lie to your husband, but you cannot lie to your own biology." I put the truck in gear. I was not going home. Not yet. I had one more stop to make. I needed to give this to Saul. We needed a plan. We needed a trap. Because you do not catch a rat by chasing it. You catch it by giving it exactly what it wants until it gets fat and slow. Then you snap the trap. Harper wanted a baby shower. Fine. I would give her a baby shower she would never forget. The champagne bubbles were rising in the crystal flutes, but the atmosphere at Tyrell's New Year Eve party was flat. It was a gathering of the people who had sided with him against me, the board members, the fair weather friends, and the sycophants who smelled money. I stood in the doorway of my son's house holding a small velvet box in my hand. My coat felt heavy on my shoulders, but not as heavy as the pride I was about to swallow. I had spent 40 years being the man who never backed down. Tonight, I had to be the man who surrendered. Tyrell saw me first. He stiffened. He was standing by the fireplace holding a glass of sparkling cider because he was playing the supportive husband to his pregnant wife. Harper was sitting on a plush armchair surrounded by admirers. She was wearing a loose-fitting gold dress that shimmered under the lights, calculated to hide a stomach that was not growing for the reason they thought. Dad, Tyrell said, walking over to me. His voice was guarded. "I did not think you were coming." I looked at my son. He looked tired. The burden of running a company he was not ready for was weighing on him. "I came to make peace, Tyrell," I said, keeping my voice low and humble. "It is New Year Eve. I do not want to start another year with this war between us. Your mother is miserable, and I am tired." Tyrell's face softened. He wanted to believe me. He desperately wanted his father back. "I am glad you are here, Dad," he said. "Just please be nice to her." I walked past him toward Harper. The room went quiet. The guests watched with bated breath, waiting for another explosion. Harper looked up at me. Her eyes narrowed. She was assessing the threat level. She saw an old man with slumped shoulders and a defeated expression. She saw a man who had been beaten by the board and humiliated by his own family. She relaxed. "Harper," I said, stopping in front of her. "Grady," she said, her voice cool. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I took a deep breath. I let my hand tremble slightly. "I want to apologize," I said loud enough for the room to hear. "I have been paranoid. I have been difficult. The doctor report, maybe it was right. Maybe I am losing my grip on things. I saw threats where there were none." Harper smiled. It was the smile of a cat that had just cornered a mouse. "I appreciate that, Grady," she said. "It takes a big man to admit when he is wrong." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the velvet box. "I want to give you this," I said, "as a peace offering, for the baby, and for the mother of my grandchild." I opened the box. Inside sat a diamond pendant. It was a large solitaire diamond surrounded by a halo of smaller stones on a platinum chain. It caught the light and sent rainbows dancing across her face. It was beautiful. It was expensive. It cost me $15,000 cash from my emergency fund. But the diamond was not the most valuable part of the necklace. The most valuable part was hidden inside the platinum setting behind the main stone. A listening device smaller than a grain of rice, military grade, capable of picking up a whisper from across a room. Saul had called in a favor from his Mossad contact to get it. Harper gasped. Her greed was her weakness. She reached out and touched the diamond. "Oh, Grady," she said, her voice changing instantly. "It is stunning." "Let me put it on you," I said. She turned around, lifting her hair. I fastened the clasp at the nape of her neck. My fingers brushed her skin. It was cold. As I secured the necklace, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I was placing the noose around her neck, and she was thanking me for it. "There," I said, stepping back. "It looks perfect on you." "Thank you, Grady," she said, touching the stone at her throat. "This means a lot, really." I stayed for another hour. I shook hands. I smiled. I drank water. I played the part of the repentant grandfather. I watched Harper parade around the room, showing off the necklace, telling everyone how I had finally come to my senses. She was drunk on power. She thought she had won everything. At 10 o'clock, I found Tyrell. "I am going to head out, son," I said. "I am feeling a bit tired." He hugged me. A real hug. "Thanks for coming, Dad," he whispered. I walked out into the cold night. I walked to my truck, which was parked down the street in the shadows. I climbed into the cab and locked the door. The silence of the truck was a relief. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a receiver unit. It looked like a walkie-talkie but heavier. I put on a pair of noise-canceling headphones. I turned the dial. Static hissed in my ears. Then suddenly the sound became crystal clear. I could hear music. I could hear laughter. I could hear the clinking of glasses. The microphone was sensitive. It was picking up the ambient noise of the party right from Harper's throat. I poured myself a cup of coffee from my thermos and waited. It took 20 minutes. I heard Harper's voice. She was breathing heavily. "I need a break," she said to someone nearby. "My back is killing me." I am going to the powder room. I heard footsteps. The noise of the party faded. I heard a door close, then the click of a lock, then silence. I leaned forward, pressing the headphones tighter to my ears. I heard the sound of a zipper, then the rustling of fabric. Then I heard her groan. "Ugh, God," she muttered. "This cramps are brutal. I need another Advil." My hand clenched around the coffee cup. There it was. Confirmation number 1. Pregnant women do not have brutal cramps that require Advil. They certainly do not have periods. Then I heard a number being dialed, the distinct tone of a keypad. It rang 3 times. "Hello," a male voice answered. It was smooth, confident. It was not Tyrell. "Hey, baby," Harper said. Her voice was completely different from the one she used with my son. It was low, sultry, and nasty. "Hey," the man said. "Are you still at the party?" "Yeah," Harper sighed. "It is a nightmare. A bunch of boring old suits pretending to be important. And Tyrell is following me around like a lost puppy. It is exhausting." I gritted my teeth. "My son, the puppy. Did the old man show up?" The man asked. "Yeah, he did." Harper laughed. "And you will not believe it." He apologized. He literally apologized to me in front of everyone. He admitted he was senile. "No way," the man laughed. "Yes way," Harper said, touching the necklace. I could hear the scratch of her finger on the microphone. "And get this. He gave me a diamond necklace. It must be at least 5 carats. The old fool is trying to buy his way back into the family." "That is rich," the man said. "So he is out of the way." "Completely," Harper said. "He is neutered. The board thinks he is crazy. Tyrell thinks he is guilty. We have total control." "Good," the man said. "When can we sell?" "Soon," Harper said. "I am going to keep playing the pregnancy card for a few more weeks. Tyrell is so desperate to be a dad, he will sign anything I put in front of him. I already have the papers drawn up to transfer the logistics division to the shell company. Once he signs that, we can liquidate the assets and disappear." "What about the baby?" the man asked. Harper snorted. "Oh, please. I will have a tragic miscarriage next month. Maybe I will blame it on the stress caused by Grady. That will be the final nail in his coffin. Tyrell will never forgive him." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was not fire, it was ice. She was planning to fake the death of a child that never existed to destroy my relationship with my son forever. And then what the man asked. "And then I file for divorce," Harper said. "I take half of what is left and I meet you in Rio. Tyrell can rot in this freezing city with his crazy parents." "I love you, babe," the man said. "I love you too," Harper said. "Now let me go flush the toilet so they think I was actually doing something in here. I have to go change this tampon. It is a heavy flow day." I heard the flush. I heard the water running. I reached over and pressed the stop button on the recorder. I took off the headphones. My ears were ringing in the silence of the truck. I had it. I had everything. The fraud, the affair, the fake pregnancy, the plan to embezzle the company, and the cruelty, the absolute breathtaking cruelty of her heart. I looked at the recorder. It was a small black box, but inside it was a bomb. I started the engine of the truck. The diesel engine rumbled to life, shaking the cab. "Rio," I whispered. "You are not going to Rio, Harper. You are going to Joliet prison." I put the truck in gear. I drove slowly past the house. I saw the lights in the windows. I saw the silhouette of my son in the living room, probably wondering where his wife was, probably worrying about her back pain. "Sleep well, son," I thought, "because tomorrow you are going to wake up, and it is going to hurt. But it is the kind of pain that saves your life." I dialed Saul. "I got it," I said. "Is it clear?" Saul asked. "It is high definition," I said. "I have her admitting to the fake pregnancy, the affair, and the embezzlement plan. And I have her laughing about faking a miscarriage to frame me." "Good God," Saul breathed. "That is cold. We are going to heat things up," I said. "Saul, get the police. But not just the police. I want the district attorney, and I want them at the warehouse tomorrow morning." "What are you planning?" Grady Saul asked. "She wants a miscarriage," I said. "I am going to give her one. But it is going to be a miscarriage of justice that ends with her in handcuffs." I drove into the night. The new year was coming, and for the first time in months I was ready for it. The King family was about to be cleaned, and I was the janitor. The wind coming off Lake Michigan was not just cold, it was aggressive. It carried the scent of dead fish and diesel fuel, a smell that had defined the first half of my life. I stood next to my truck parked in the shadow of a rusted shipping container. This was the old terminal, the place where I had loaded my first cargo 30 years ago. It was abandoned now, a graveyard of steel and concrete left to rot by the changing economy. It was the perfect place for what had to happen tonight. I checked my watch. It was midnight. The city skyline was a distant glow, a reminder of the world Tyrell thought he owned. But out here, there were no boardrooms. There were no assistants to bring you coffee. There was only the wind and the water and the truth. I saw the headlights before I heard the engine. Two beams of white light cutting through the darkness, bouncing over the potholes of the access road. It was Tyrell's car, a sleek black sports car that cost more than my first house. It looked ridiculous here, like a diamond dropped in a gutter. The car stopped 10 yards away. The engine idled with a low purr. The door opened and Tyrell stepped out. He was wearing a camel hair coat and expensive Italian leather shoes that were immediately ruined by the slush and grime of the dock. He looked around, his face twisted in disgust. He did not see the history of this place. He only saw the dirt. He walked toward me, stopping well out of arm reach. His posture was stiff, arrogant. He looked like a man who believed he held all the cards. "This is dramatic," Dad Tyrell called out over the wind. "Why did you bring me out here? We could have signed the papers at the office tomorrow." I did not move. I leaned against the grill of my truck, my arms crossed over my chest. "The office is compromised, Tyrell," I said, my voice flat, "and I am not here to sign papers." Tyrell laughed. It was a harsh sound that was snatched away by the wind. "Then what are we doing here? Are you going to threaten me? Are you going to try to intimidate me with your old war stories? It is over, Dad. Harper and I have the votes. We have the company. You are done." He took a step closer, his confidence bolstered by his anger. "Just let it go," he said. "Go retire with Mom. Let me run the business. Harper has great ideas. She is going to modernize everything." "Modernize," I repeated. "Is that what she calls it?" I reached into the cab of my truck and pulled out a portable speaker. I placed it on the hood. "I brought you here because you need to hear something I said. And you need to hear it where no one can see you cry." Tyrell rolled his eyes. He turned to walk back to his car. "I am leaving," he said. "You are insane." I pressed play. The sound of Harper's voice blasted through the desolate shipping yard. It was loud, clear, and undeniable. "He is a puppy," she said on the recording. "A lost puppy following me around. It is exhausting." Tyrell froze. His hand was on the door handle of his car, but he did not pull it. He stood there, his back to me, paralyzed by the sound of his wife's voice. I turned the volume up. "I will have a tragic miscarriage next month," the recording continued. "Maybe I will blame it on the stress caused by Grady. That will be the final nail in his coffin. Tyrell will never forgive him." Tyrell turned around slowly. His face was pale in the moonlight. His mouth was open, but no words came out. He looked like a man who had been shot in the gut. "What is this?" he whispered. I did not answer. I let the tape run. "And then I file for divorce," Harper's voice cackled. "I take half of what is left and I meet you in Rio. Tyrell can rot in this freezing city with his crazy parents." I pressed stop. The silence that followed was heavy, heavier than the shipping containers around us. Tyrell stared at the speaker. He shook his head slowly. "It is fake," he said, his voice trembling. "You used AI. You used some computer program to fake her voice. You are sick." I looked at him with pity. Denial is a powerful drug. It protects the mind from shattering. But tonight, I had to be the sledgehammer. "It is not AI, Tyrell," I said. "It was recorded 3 hours ago, in the bathroom of your own house. While you were downstairs pouring drinks for her friends, she was upstairs planning your destruction." "Liar." Tyrell screamed. He rushed at me. He covered the distance between us in 3 strides. He was younger than me. He was taller. He worked out at a fancy gym with personal trainers. But he had never been in a fight. He had never had to fight for his life. He swung a wild, clumsy punch at my face. It was fueled by rage and heartbreak. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I stepped in. I was a Marine before I was a CEO. Muscle memory does not age. I blocked his arm with my left forearm, deflecting the blow upward. In one fluid motion, I stepped inside his guard and swept his right leg with my boot while shoving his chest hard. It was not a punch. It was a takedown. Simple, efficient. Tyrell hit the ground hard. The slush splashed up around him. The air left his lungs in a wheezing gasp. He tried to scramble up, but I put my boot on his chest. Not hard enough to crush him, just hard enough to keep him down. "Stay down, son," I said, my voice calm. "Do not make me hurt you. Get off me," Tyrell yelled, clawing at my boot. "You are ruining my life. I am saving your life," I roared. The sound of my voice echoed off the metal containers, silencing the wind. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the evidence bag, the one with the tampon wrapper. I threw it onto his chest. "Look at it," I ordered. Tyrell stopped struggling. He looked at the plastic bag. He saw the blue wrapper. He saw the stained tissue. "She is not pregnant, Tyrell," I said, staring down at him. "She never was. She is on her period right now. She faked the whole thing to stop me from investigating her. She played you. She played your mother. And she played the board." Tyrell picked up the bag. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He looked at the evidence of the biological truth. The lie he had built his future on crumbled in his hands. "No," he whimpered. "No," she said. "She showed me the test. She showed you a stick she bought online," I said. "Or a stick she stole from someone else." "Think, Tyrell. Has she let you go to the doctor with her? Has she let you see the ultrasound screen? Or does she always have an excuse?" Tyrell closed his eyes. Tears leaked out, mixing with the dirt on his face. He knew. Deep down, he knew. "She moved the money," I said. Tyrell opened his eyes. "What?" "She told her lover she was going to liquidate the assets," I said. "Check your phone, Tyrell. Check the accounts, the ones she has access to." Tyrell scrambled to sit up. I took my foot off his chest. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. His fingers were muddy and cold. He fumbled with the passcode. He opened the banking app. The screen glowed blue, illuminating his terrified face. I watched him. I watched his eyes scan the numbers. I watched the color drain from his face until he looked like a corpse. "It is gone," he whispered. "Check the savings," I said. "Zero," he said. "Check the operating capital," I said. "Zero," he choked out. "Check the line of credit." "Maxed out," he said. His voice was so quiet I could barely hear it over the wind. "She cleared it out, Tyrell. While you were at the party shaking hands, she was on her phone transferring everything to an offshore shell company. She did not wait for the divorce. She took it all tonight." Tyrell dropped the phone. It landed in a puddle of icy water. He did not pick it up. He looked at his hands, the hands that had signed the papers giving her access, the hands that had pushed me away. "She took everything," he said. "No," I said. "She took the money. Money we can make back. I can make back." I reached down and grabbed him by the lapels of his expensive coat. I hauled him to his feet. He was limp like a rag doll. "She took your pride," I said, shaking him. "She took your dignity. But she did not take your name. You are a king, and kings do not die in the mud." Tyrell looked at me. His eyes were hollow. "I am sorry, Dad," he sobbed. He collapsed into my arms. He buried his face in my shoulder and wept. He cried like he hadn't cried since he was a boy and fell off his bike. Great, heaving sobs that shook his whole body. I held him. I held my son while the wind howled around us. I felt his tears soaking into my coat. I patted his back with my gloved hand. "I know, son," I said softly. "I know. It hurts. It is supposed to hurt. That is how you know you are alive." We stood there for a long time, father and son in the wreckage of a betrayal. Finally, Tyrell pulled away. He wiped his face with his sleeve, smearing the dirt. He looked at the phone in the puddle. "What do we do?" he asked. His voice was hoarse. "We do what we do best," I said. "We fight." "But the money," Tyrell said. "The money is just paper," I said. "I called the district attorney an hour ago. They are waiting for us. Harper thinks she has escaped. She thinks she is going to get on a plane to Rio tomorrow." I walked over and picked up his phone. I wiped it on my coat and handed it back to him. "She does not know that we have the recording," I said. "She does not know that you know." Tyrell looked at the phone. His expression changed. The sorrow was fading, replaced by a cold, hard anger. It was the same anger I had felt when I saw her drop the pill. "She is at home," he said. "She texted me 10 minutes ago. She said she was waiting for me in bed." I nodded. "You are going to go home," I said. "You are going to crawl into bed next to her. You are going to kiss her goodnight. And you are not going to say a word." Tyrell looked at me shocked. "You want me to sleep next to her?" I want you to be the best actor in the world, I said. I want her to feel safe. I want her to think she has won, because tomorrow morning she is holding a baby shower. Yeah, Tyrell said bitterly. A shower for a fake baby. Exactly, I said. And that is where we are going to end this. All the guests will be there. The board members, the friends, the police. I put my hand on his shoulder. Can you do it? I asked. Can you look the devil in the eye and smile one last time? Tyrell looked at the dark water of the lake. He took a deep breath. He straightened his coat. He looked at me. And for the first time in months, I saw my son. Not the boy who wanted to be a CEO, but the man who was ready to do what was necessary. I can do it, he said. Good, I said. Now get in your car, go home, and do not let her see you bleed. I watched him walk back to his Porsche. He walked differently now. The arrogance was gone. But so was the weakness. He walked like a man marching to war. The car engine roared to life. He backed up and drove away, leaving me alone in the dark. I looked at the speaker on the hood of my truck. I picked it up. Harper thought she had destroyed us. She thought she had broken the bond between a father and son. She didn't know that steel is forged in fire, and tonight she had just lit the furnace that would burn her to ash. I climbed into my truck. I had one more call to make. I needed to tell Saul to bring the extra chairs for the party tomorrow. We were going to have a full house. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of my son's kitchen, casting a soft, deceptive light on the scene of the crime. I was not in the room, but I could see it clearly in my mind as I sat in the unmarked police van parked 2 streets away. Tyrell had a wire taped to his chest, hidden beneath his dress shirt. Through the earpiece, I could hear the domestic sounds of a breakfast that was about to become a felony, the clinking of a spoon against a ceramic mug, the rustle of paper, the hum of the refrigerator. It sounded like a normal Sunday morning in the suburbs, but it was actually the final act of a tragedy. Harper was humming. It was a cheerful melody that grated on my nerves. She was sitting at the granite island wearing a silk robe that cost more than a month of groceries. In front of her lay a stack of legal documents. These were not the standard company transfers. These were the documents she had drawn up with her lover, the ones that would give her full power of attorney over Tyrell's assets and liquidate the logistics division into her offshore shell company. She believed that Tyrell was broken. She believed that after our fight at the docks, he had come crawling back to her, desperate for forgiveness and terrified of losing his wife and unborn child. Tyrell walked into the kitchen. I could hear his footsteps, heavy and slow. He was playing the part perfectly. The beaten man, the submissive husband. "Good morning, baby," Harper said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I made you coffee, just the way you like it." "Thanks," Tyrell mumbled. He pulled out a chair and sat down. The sound of the chair scraping against the floor was loud in my ear. Harper slid the papers across the island toward him. "I know this is hard, Tyrell," she said softly, placing her hand over his. "But it is for the best. Your father is sick. We have to protect the company from his madness. Once you sign these, we can put the assets in a secure trust. It is the only way to ensure our baby has a future." "Our baby," Tyrell repeated. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Yes," Harper said, squeezing his hand. "Our little miracle. Do it for him, Tyrell. Do it for us." I held my breath in the van. Beside me, Saul was checking his watch. The district attorney sat across from us, looking grim. We were waiting for the signal. The signal was the signature. Once Tyrell signed his name on the line marked "Witness and Beneficiary," the crime of fraud was technically complete. She would have solicited the signature under false pretenses. But we were not just getting her for fraud. We were getting her for everything. Tyrell picked up the pen. I could imagine him looking at the black ink tip. I could imagine the rage boiling in his gut, the urge to reach across the table and strangle the woman who had turned his life into a lie. But he held it back. He was a king. And kings know how to wait. "I am sorry it came to this," Tyrell said. "Me too," baby Harper sighed. "But Grady left us no choice. He declared war on our family. We are just finishing it." "Yes," Tyrell said. "We are finishing it." He lowered the pen to the paper. The scratch of the nib was audible through the wire. He signed his name. "Tyrell King." "There," Harper said, her voice brightening with greed. That was not so bad, was it? She reached out and snatched the papers away from him. She could not help herself. The mask slipped for a second. She did not look at him with love. She looked at the papers with lust. She flipped to the back page, checking the signature, ensuring it was legal, ensuring she had won. "I will take these to the lawyer tomorrow morning," she said, stacking them neatly. "We can start the transfer process immediately. By next week, we will be free, Tyrell. We can go anywhere. We can do anything." She stood up, clutching the papers to her chest like a prize. "I am going to get dressed," she said. "The guests will be arriving for the shower in 2 hours. I want to look perfect." She turned to walk out of the kitchen. "Harper," Tyrell said. She stopped. "What is it, sweetie?" "Did you really love me?" Tyrell asked. The question hung in the air. I closed my eyes. I knew the answer. Saul knew the answer. Even the district attorney knew the answer. Harper laughed. It was a cold dismissal. "Of course I love you, silly," she said. "Now hurry up and get dressed. We have a show to put on." She turned back around. "Now, Saul," I said into the radio. The order went out. The silence of the suburban street was shattered not by sirens, but by the heavy thud of boots hitting the pavement. We did not use sirens. We did not want to give her a chance to flush anything or delete anything. We wanted shock and awe. I jumped out of the van and ran toward the house. My bad knee protested, but I ignored it. I needed to be there. I needed to see her face. Inside the kitchen, Harper heard the noise. She heard the front door burst open. She heard the shout of police officers flooding the hallway. "Police search warrant, don't move." Harper dropped the papers. They scattered across the floor, white sheets of betrayal settling on the hardwood. She spun around, her eyes wide with confusion. She looked at Tyrell. "Tyrell, what is happening?" she screamed. Tyrell did not move. He sat at the island, his hands folded in front of him, staring at his coffee cup. He did not look surprised. He did not look scared. He looked relieved. 3 officers stormed into the kitchen, guns drawn but pointed low. The district attorney followed them, flanked by 2 detectives. "Harper King, put your hands where I can see them," the lead detective shouted. Harper laughed, nervous and high-pitched. "Is this a joke?" she asked, looking around wildly. "Tyrell, tell them. Tell them this is a mistake. Why are you sitting there? Do something." She backed away until she hit the refrigerator. "I am pregnant," she shrieked, clutching her stomach. "You cannot do this to a pregnant woman. I will sue you. I will sue all of you." I walked into the kitchen then. I walked past the officers. I walked past the papers on the floor. I stood next to my son. I put my hand on his shoulder. Harper looked at me. Her face went pale white. She looked at Grady. She looked at Tyrell. And then she looked at the necklace I had given her the night before, the diamond pendant resting in the hollow of her throat. "You," she whispered. "The game is over, Harper," I said. "What did you do?" she hissed. "You framed me." "Tyrell, he is framing me. Tell them about the baby." Tyrell stood up. He turned to face her. His eyes were dry. "There is no baby, Harper," Tyrell said, his voice steady. Harper froze. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish on a hook. "What are you talking about?" she stammered. "Of course there is. You saw the test." "I saw a stick you bought on the internet," Tyrell said. "And I saw the tampon wrapper in the trash last night." The color drained from her face completely. She looked like a ghost. "You went through my trash?" she whispered, horrified. "We went through everything, Harper," I said, stepping forward. "We have your financial records. We have the fake medical report you forged for me. We have the receipt for the scopolamine. And thanks to that lovely necklace you are wearing, we have a recording of your conversation with your boyfriend from last night." Harper's hand flew to the necklace. She ripped it off her neck, breaking the chain. She threw it across the room. "You tapped me," she screamed. "That is illegal. That is inadmissible." "It was a gift," I said, shrugging. "And in the state of Illinois, consent laws can be tricky, but when you are discussing a conspiracy to commit murder and grand larceny, the judges tend to be very lenient with the evidence." "Murder," she choked out. "I didn't kill anyone." "Attempted murder," I said, pointing at her. "You tried to poison Esther, and when that failed, you tried to kill my reputation. You tried to kill my relationship with my son, and you were planning to fake the death of a child to finish the job. That is a lot of killing for one innocent woman." "Officer, arrest her," the district attorney said. 2 officers moved in. They grabbed Harper's arms. She fought them. She kicked and screamed, losing all pretense of being a lady. "Tyrell, help me," she begged, looking at him with desperate eyes. "I did it for us. I did it for the money. We could have been rich." Tyrell looked at her. He looked at the woman he had married, the woman he had wanted to build a life with. "I am already rich," Tyrell said softly. "I have a family who tells me the truth. That is something you will never have." They spun her around. The handcuffs clicked shut. The sound was metallic and final. It echoed in the kitchen, cutting through her screams. "You are making a mistake," Harper yelled as they dragged her toward the door. "I am Harper King. I am a king." "Not anymore," I said. As they hauled her out into the front yard, the neighbors were already gathering. They stood on their lawns in their bathrobes, watching the spectacle. The woman who had looked down on them, who had judged their cars and their clothes, was being shoved into the back of a squad car like a common criminal. I watched her go. I watched the door slam shut. I watched the car drive away. I turned back to the kitchen. Saul was picking up the papers from the floor, putting them into an evidence bag. Tyrell was still standing there staring at the empty doorway. He looked broken, but he was standing. I poured 2 cups of coffee. I handed one to him. "Drink this, son," I said. "We have a lot of work to do." Tyrell took the cup. His hands were trembling slightly, but he took a sip. "Is she gone?" he asked. "She is gone," I said. He nodded slowly. He looked around the kitchen. The house felt different. It felt emptier, but it also felt cleaner. The poison was gone. "What about the baby shower?" he asked, looking at the clock. "The guests will be here in an hour." I smiled. A grim, hard smile. "Let them come," I said. "We will serve the cake. And we will tell them the truth. We will tell them that the King family does not hide its scars. We wear them as proof that we survived." I put my arm around my son. We stood there in the silence of the morning, reclaiming our territory one breath at a time. The nightmare was over. The waking up had begun, and for the first time in a long time, the sun coming through the window felt warm. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and fear, but Harper sat in the metal chair as if it were a throne. She had fixed her hair. She had wiped the smudged mascara from her cheeks. Even in handcuffs, she managed to look down her nose at the detective sitting across from her. I stood behind the one-way mirror in the observation room. My son stood next to me. Tyrell was pale. He looked like a man waking up from a long coma, finding the world he knew had burned to ash. He pressed his hand against the cold glass, staring at the woman he had vowed to protect. Harper lawyer was a man named Thorne. He wore a suit that cost more than a police officer makes in a year, and he had a reputation for turning guilty verdicts into mistrials. He was pacing the small room, waving his finger at the detective. "This is harassment," Thorne shouted, his voice muffled slightly by the glass. "You arrested my client based on an illegal wiretap." The recording obtained by Mr. King was non-consensual. "In the state of Illinois, that is a felony. It is inadmissible. You have nothing." Harper smirked. She leaned forward, the fluorescent light reflecting off her pale skin. "He is right," she said coolly. "Grady King is a paranoid old man with a vendetta. He planted a bug on me. He stalked me. And now he is wasting taxpayer money because he cannot accept that his son loves me more than him." The detective looked at his notes. "We have the financial records, Mrs. King. We have the transfer of funds to the Cayman Islands." Harper laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "I have power of attorney," she said. Tyrell signed the papers. "I am the acting financial officer. I moved the money to protect it from Grady lawsuits. It was a fiduciary decision. You cannot arrest me for doing my job." Thorne slammed his hand on the table. "My client is a pregnant woman," Thorne roared. "She is under extreme duress. If she suffers a miscarriage in this station, I will sue this department for $50 million. I will have your badge, detective. I will own this building." I looked at Tyrell. He winced at the mention of the pregnancy. The lie was still being used as a weapon even now. "She is good," Tyrell whispered. "She is really good. She is a professional son," I said. "She believes her own lies. That is what makes her dangerous." Inside the room, Harper was gaining confidence. She saw the detective hesitate. She saw the lawyer making headway. She thought she had found a loophole. "I want to go home," Harper said, lifting her chin. "I want to go home to my husband. Tyrell is probably worried sick. He knows I would never hurt anyone." She looked directly at the mirror. She could not see us, but she knew we were there. She stared right into Tyrell's eyes. "Tyrell, baby, if you are watching this, tell them." Harper said, her voice softening into that fake sweetness. Tell them to let us go. Think of the baby Tyrell. Tyrell turned away from the glass. He could not look at her. He walked to the back of the dark room and sat on a folding chair, putting his head in his hands. I tapped on the glass. The detective looked up. I gave him the signal. It was time. I walked out of the observation room and opened the heavy steel door of the interrogation room. The air inside was thick with tension. Thorne stopped pacing. Harper looked at me with pure venom. "Get him out of here," Thorne demanded. "This man is a witness in a hostile party. He has no right to be in this interview." I ignored the lawyer. I walked to the table. I was carrying a small cardboard box. I placed it gently on the metal surface. Harper sneered. "What is this, Grady? Another gift? Is there a bomb in there this time?" "No, Harper," I said, my voice calm. "It is a memory." I opened the box. I reached in and pulled out a Christmas ornament. It was a reindeer. A cheap plastic reindeer with a red nose and googly eyes. It was tacky. It was old. It was something Esther had bought at a dollar store 20 years ago because Tyrell had thought it was funny when he was a boy. Harper looked at it and laughed. "You interrupted my lawyer for this," she asked. "A piece of trash." "You hated this ornament," I said, holding it up. "At the party you told Esther it looked like garbage. You told the caterer to throw it away." "Because it is garbage," Harper said. "It is cheap and ugly, just like this whole charade." I turned the reindeer around. I pointed to the left eye of the plastic animal. "It is cheap," I agreed, "but it has a great view." I looked at the detective. "Set it up," I said. The detective opened his laptop. He connected it to the large monitor on the wall. He took a small memory card from an evidence bag and inserted it into the computer. Thorne looked nervous. "What is this?" he asked. "What are you showing us?" "I am showing you the party, Mr. Thorne," I said. "Specifically, I am showing you the angle from the Christmas tree." Harper's face changed. The smirk vanished. She looked at the reindeer eye. She looked at the screen. She began to breathe faster. "You see, Harper," I said, leaning on the table. "I knew you hated the decorations. I knew you would want to stand near the tree to critique them or to hide from the cameras. So I replaced the eye of this reindeer with a high-definition micro camera. It has a motion sensor, and it records in 4K. The screen flickered to life. The video was crystal clear. The angle was slightly wide, revealing the living room in vivid detail. We saw the guests mingling, we saw Tyrell laughing, and then we saw a figure step into the frame. It was Harper. She was wearing her silver gown. She looked beautiful. She looked like an angel. In the video, she looked around. Her eyes scanned the room. She looked right at the reindeer. For a second, it looked like she was staring at us in the interrogation room. Then she scoffed and turned her back to the tree, blocking the view of the room, but giving the camera a perfect close-up of her hands. The room went deadly silent. The only sound was the hum of the computer fan. On the screen, Harper reached into the hidden pocket of her dress. Thorne leaned forward, squinting. Harper stopped breathing. We watched her pull out the blue capsule. The camera caught the light reflecting off the gelatin casing. We saw her thumb flick it open. We saw the powder fall into the glass of eggnog she was holding in her left hand. It was undeniable. It was not a diet pill. Diet pills do not come in hidden pockets and get dumped into other people's drinks when no one is looking. But that was not the payoff. That was just the setup. In the video, Harper stirred the drink with the cinnamon stick. She watched the powder dissolve. And then she smiled. It was not the smile she used for Tyrell. It was not the smile she used for the magazines. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated malice. It was a smile that reached her eyes and turned them into black holes. It was the face of a demon enjoying the suffering it was about to cause. She lifted the glass slightly as if toasting the air, and then she whispered. The microphone on the camera was not as good as the one on the necklace, but in the quiet room the audio was clear enough. "Die, you old bitch." The words hung in the interrogation room like smoke. "Die, you old bitch." She didn't say lose weight. She didn't say sleep well. She said die. The video continued. We saw her turn around and walk toward Esther. We saw the moment I bumped into her. We saw the swap, and we saw her drink the poison she had meant for my wife. The detective hit pause. The image on the screen froze on Harper's face right after she whispered the curse. I looked at the lawyer. Thorne had closed his folder. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He was a shark, but he knew when there was blood in the water, and this time it was his own client bleeding out. He sat down slowly. He did not say a word about lawsuits. He did not say a word about illegal wiretaps. He knew that a jury would watch that video and burn her at the stake. I looked at Harper. She was staring at the screen. Her mouth was open slightly. Her hands were trembling in the cuffs. The arrogance was gone. The victimhood was gone. The mask had not just slipped, it had shattered. She looked small. She looked ugly. "It is a deep fake," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You did this with a computer. That is not me." "Stop it," Harper Thorne said quietly. "Just stop." Harper whipped her head around to look at him. "You are supposed to defend me," she screamed. "Do something." "I cannot defend that," Thorne said, pointing at the screen. "You told me it was a diet pill. You told me it was an accident. That video shows intent. That video shows malice. That is attempted murder in the first degree." Harper began to hyperventilate. She looked around the room frantically, searching for an exit, searching for a lie that would work. "I was stressed," she cried. "I didn't mean it. It was just a figure of speech. I just wanted her to sleep. I just wanted her to stop judging me." She looked at the glass mirror. She threw herself out of the chair and slammed her body against the window. "Tyrell," she screamed. "Tyrell, help me. You know I love you. You know I wouldn't do this. They are lying to you." I looked at the mirror. I knew Tyrell was on the other side. I knew he was seeing the woman he married banging on the glass like a trapped animal. I knew he was hearing the words, "Die, you old bitch," echoing in his head. The detective stood up. He walked over to Harper and pulled her away from the glass. "Sit down, Mrs. King," he said firmly. Harper collapsed. She fell to the floor, weeping. But these were not the pretty tears of a debutante. These were the ugly, guttural sobs of a criminal who has been caught. I stood over her. "You wanted the house, Harper," I said, looking down at her. "You wanted the money. You wanted the legacy. You were willing to kill a grandmother for it. You were willing to destroy a father and son for it." She looked up at me. Her mascara was running down her face in black streaks. She looked like a nightmare. "Go to hell," she spat. "I am already there, Harper," I said. "I have been there since I saw you drop that pill, but now I am climbing out, and I am leaving you here." I turned to the detective. "You have your evidence," I said. "You have the financial records proving fraud. You have the recording proving conspiracy, and you have the video proving attempted murder. Do you need anything else?" The detective shook his head. He looked impressed. He looked a little scared of me, actually. "No, Mr. King," he said. "This is more than enough. We will book her immediately. No bail. Not with the flight risk and the offshore accounts." I nodded. I walked to the door. I paused and looked back at Thorne. "You might want to check your retainer." "Mr. Thorne," I said, "I froze the accounts this morning. I do not think her check is going to clear." Thorne's face went pale. He looked at Harper with disgust. He grabbed his briefcase and stood up. "I am recusing myself," he muttered. "I cannot represent a client who lies to me about capital crimes." He walked out, leaving Harper alone on the floor. I walked out of the room. I walked into the hallway. Tyrell was standing there. He was leaning against the wall, his eyes red, his face wet. He looked at me. He didn't say anything. He just nodded. It was a nod of acknowledgement, a nod of sorrow. "Did you see it?" I asked. "I saw it," Tyrell whispered. "I saw her. I really saw her." "Good," I said. We walked toward the exit. Behind us, the faint sound of Harper's screaming echoed through the station. She was screaming for mercy. She was screaming for her baby. But nobody was listening. The reindeer had seen the truth, and the truth does not negotiate. The hallway of the police station transformed into a stage for Harper's final performance. The handcuffs were tight around her wrists, but her voice was unbound, and she used it to shatter the sterile atmosphere of the precinct. As the two officers attempted to guide her toward the holding cells, she dug her heels into the linoleum floor and let out a scream that curdled the blood of everyone present. It was not a scream of anger this time, but a scream of maternal terror, a calculated sound designed to freeze the hearts of decent men. "My baby," she shrieked, twisting her body violently against the grip of the officers. "You are hurting my baby. I am having pains. Oh God, the stress is killing him." The procession stopped. The sergeant at the desk looked up, his face paling. In the modern world, there are few things more terrifying to a police department than the prospect of a pregnant woman losing her child in their custody. The liability alone could bankrupt the city. The bad press could end careers. Harper knew this. She played on their fear with the precision of a surgeon. "I need a doctor," she wailed, doubling over as if struck by a sudden cramp. "I am bleeding. I can feel it. Please do not let my baby die in this place. I have a high-risk pregnancy. My obstetrician warned me about stress." The young female officer holding Harper's left arm hesitated. She looked at the lead detective, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "Sir," she said, her voice wavering, "she says she is in pain. If she is having complications, we cannot put her in a cell. We have to transport her to the hospital." That was the play. I watched from the doorway of the interrogation room, standing next to my son. Harper wanted a hospital. A hospital meant a private room. It meant sympathy. It meant a delay in processing. And most importantly, it meant a chance to escape or to stage a medical event that she could blame on us later. Tyrell stood frozen. Even after seeing the video, even after hearing the recording, the sight of his wife screaming in apparent agony triggered a primal instinct in him. He took a half step forward, his hand reaching out. "Is she hurting?" Tyrell whispered. "Dad, what if we are wrong about the medical part? What if the tampon wrapper was old?" I grabbed his arm. My grip was like iron. "Look at her eyes, Tyrell," I said. "Look at her eyes, not her mouth." Harper was putting on a show, but her eyes were darting around the room, assessing the impact of her words. She saw the hesitation in the officers. She saw the sergeant reaching for the phone, probably to call an ambulance. She pressed her advantage. "I am going to sue you," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "If I lose this child, I will own this entire department. Get your hands off me. You are crushing him." She threw herself against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor, clutching her stomach protectively. It was a masterclass in manipulation. The officers backed away, terrified of touching her. "Call the paramedics," the sergeant ordered. "Get an ambulance here now." Harper sobbed, burying her face in her knees, hiding her dry eyes. She thought she had won. She thought she would be carried out on a stretcher, the tragic victim of police brutality. I stepped forward. The sound of my boots on the floor was heavy and rhythmic. "Cancel the ambulance," I boomed. The sergeant looked at me. "Mr. King, she claims she is in medical distress. We have to follow protocol. She is in distress, all right," I said, walking up to the circle of officers. "But it is not medical. It is legal." I looked down at Harper. She looked up at me, and for a second the fear was real. She knew that I knew. "She is lying," I said. "There is no baby. There is no high-risk pregnancy. There is only a woman trying to avoid a jail cell." "You are a monster!" Harper screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He wants my baby dead. He has been trying to kill it for months. Do not listen to him. He is insane." The detective looked between us. He was caught in the middle of a war he did not understand. "Mr. King," the detective said, "we cannot take the risk. If she is pregnant and something happens..." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the evidence bag containing the tampon wrapper. I held it up. "I found this in her trash last night," I said. "A pregnant woman does not need these." Harper's eyes widened. "That is not mine," she yelled. "He planted it. He went through my garbage and planted it. He is obsessed with me." The doubt returned to the detective's face. It was my word against hers, and right now she was the one on the floor, screaming in pain. "We have a medical officer on site," I said. "Dr. Evans." "I saw him in the break room." The sergeant nodded. "Evans is here. Bring him out," I said. "If she is really having complications, she needs immediate attention right here. She does not need an ambulance ride to buy her time. She needs a doctor to check her vitals now." Harper scrambled backward, crab-walking away from me. "No," she hissed. "No police doctors. I want my specialist. I want Dr. Eris." "Dr. Eris does not exist, Harper," I said. "Just like your pregnancy." Dr. Evans appeared from the back hallway. He was a gray-haired man who had seen it all. He carried a medical bag. "What is the problem?" Evans asked, looking at the woman on the floor. "She claims she is miscarrying," the detective said. Evans knelt down. He reached for Harper's wrist to check her pulse. "Don't touch me!" Harper shrieked, pulling her hand away. "Get away from me!" "Ma'am, if you are bleeding, I need to assess you," Evans said calmly. "I will not let you touch me," she screamed, kicking out at him. Her resistance was too violent. A woman concerned for her baby would welcome a doctor. A woman protecting a lie would fight him. The officers saw it too. The hesitation vanished, replaced by suspicion. "Hold her down," the detective ordered. "Evans, check her abdomen." "No." Harper howled. "No, no, no." Two female officers moved in. They pinned Harper's arms to the floor. She thrashed like a wild animal. She bit the air. She cursed. She spit. The mask of the elegant socialite was gone, entirely revealing the cornered rat beneath. Dr. Evans moved in. He reached for the hem of her silk blouse. Harper let out a sound that was not human. It was a guttural roar of pure defeat. Evans lifted the blouse. Underneath the silk, there was a bump. It looked perfect. It was round. It was the right size for a 3-month pregnancy. Tyrell, watching from the hallway, let out a small gasp. For a second, he thought I was wrong. He thought he was looking at his child. But then Evans touched it. He pressed his fingers into the skin. Human flesh has give. It is warm. It has a pulse beneath it. Evans frowned. He pressed harder. The bump dented. It did not bounce back like flesh. It stayed dented like memory foam. Evans looked up, his face grim. "This is not skin," he said. He grabbed the edge of the bump near her hip. He pulled. There was a sound, a wet, tearing sound of adhesive pulling away from skin. Harper stopped screaming. She went perfectly silent. She stared at the ceiling, her eyes dead. Evans pulled harder. The entire stomach peeled away. It was a prosthetic. A high-end silicone belly matched perfectly to her skin tone, glued on with theatrical adhesive. Evans lifted it up. It hung from his hand like a grotesque rubber mask. Underneath, Harper's stomach was flat, perfectly flat. The silence in the hallway was absolute. The officers stared at the silicone piece swinging in the doctor's hand. The detective looked at Harper with disgust. The sergeant looked down at his logs where he had almost written a request for an ambulance. I turned to Tyrell. He was standing 10 feet away. He was looking at the woman he had slept next to. He was looking at the stomach he had kissed. He was looking at the empty space where he thought his future lived. The reality hit him with the force of a physical blow. The nights he had spent talking to her belly. The names they had discussed. The nursery he had painted. It was all rubber and glue. It was a prop in her con game. Tyrell's face turned a shade of green I had never seen before. He brought his hand to his mouth. He stumbled to the nearest trash can. He gripped the edges, his knuckles white. And then he retched. He vomited until there was nothing left. It was a violent purge. He was expelling the lies. He was expelling the betrayal. He was expelling the love he had felt for a phantom. Harper lay on the floor, exposed and defeated. She did not look at Tyrell. She stared at the fluorescent lights. "Is that enough medical evidence for you, detective?" I asked. The detective looked at the silicone belly, then at Harper. "Get her up," he said, his voice cold as ice. "Put her in the holding cell and add obstruction of justice to the charges." The officers hauled her to her feet. She was limp. The fight had left her. Without the belly, she looked small and ordinary. She was just another criminal who had tried to outsmart the truth. Tyrell wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He stood up straight. He walked over to where Harper stood between the officers. Harper looked at him. There was a flicker of hope in her eyes, a last desperate attempt to manipulate him. "Tyrell," she whispered, "I did it for us. I wanted to give you a family." Tyrell looked at her. He looked at her flat stomach. "You are not a family," he said, his voice raspy but clear. "You are a disease. And I am finally cured." He turned his back on her. "Take her away," Tyrell said to the officers. They marched her down the hall. The sound of her heels clicking on the floor was the only eulogy for the marriage of Tyrell and Harper King. I walked over to my son. I put a hand on his back. "Let's go home, son," I said. Tyrell nodded. He looked at the trash can where he had been sick. "Dad," he said. "Yeah. She really thought we were stupid, didn't she?" "She thought we were weak," I said. "She confused kindness with weakness. It is a common mistake among predators." We walked out of the station. The air outside was cold and clean. It smelled of snow and exhaust, but to me it smelled like victory. The King family had been poisoned, but we had survived. The antidote was painful, but it worked. And as we walked to the truck, I knew that the hardest part was over. Now we just had to rebuild. But we would build on solid ground this time, not on rubber and lies. The silence in the library was heavier than the silence at the police station. The police station silence was the absence of noise, but this silence was the presence of grief. Esther sat in her high-backed velvet chair holding a handkerchief that was already soaked through. She looked at our son Tyrell, who was kneeling on the Persian rug in front of us. It was a pose of submission that should have made me feel powerful, but instead it just made me feel tired. Tyrell looked like a shattered man. His expensive suit was rumpled, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were swollen red. He reached out and tried to take his mother's hand, but Esther pulled back slightly. That small recoil was the most painful thing I had ever seen. My wife, who had a heart big enough to forgive the world, could not bring herself to touch the son who had watched a woman try to kill her. "Mom, please." Tyrell sobbed, his voice breaking. "You have to believe me. I did not know. I swear on my life I did not know she was faking the pregnancy. I did not know she hated you." She twisted my mind. "She made me think Dad was the enemy." He looked at me then. His eyes were desperate, begging for a lifeline. "Dad, tell her," Tyrell pleaded. "You saw the video. You heard the recording. Harper is a psychopath. I was just a victim too. I was brainwashed. I am sorry. I am so sorry for everything I said. I am sorry I froze the accounts. I am sorry I tried to push you out. I was just trying to protect my family." I stood by the fireplace watching him. I watched the way he cried. I watched the way he blamed Harper. He was sorry, yes, but he was sorry he got caught. He was sorry his life had blown up. He was not yet sorry for the weakness that allowed it to happen. He was trying to wash away his sins with tears, but some stains are too deep for salt water. "You are not a victim, Tyrell," I said, my voice low and rumble. "You are an accomplice." "No, Dad," Tyrell cried, shaking his head. "I loved her. Is that a crime?" "Loving her is not a crime," I said. "But standing by while she humiliated your mother is. Signing over my company without asking me a single question is. You want to blame Harper for everything. You want to say she cast a spell on you. But magic only works on the willing. You let her in, Tyrell. You let her whisper in your ear because she told you what you wanted to hear. She told you that you were smarter than me. She told you that you deserved the crown without the weight." Tyrell lowered his head. His shoulders shook. "I know," he whispered. "I was stupid. I was weak. But I am back now. I am here. We can fix this. I will annul the marriage. I will testify against her. I will do whatever it takes to make it right. Just please let me come home. Let me stay here tonight. I cannot go back to that empty house." He looked at Esther again. "Mom, please," he said. "I am your son." Esther looked at me. I saw the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to pull him into her lap like he was 5 years old and tell him everything was going to be okay. But Esther was a wise woman. She knew that comfort is not always a cure. Sometimes comfort is a poison that keeps a man weak. She nodded at me, giving me the permission to do what a father has to do. "Stand up, Tyrell," I said. He stood up, wiping his face with his sleeve. He looked at me with hope. He thought the lecture was over. He thought we were moving on to the forgiveness phase. I walked over to my desk. I picked up a manila envelope that I had prepared an hour ago while he was in the bathroom washing his face. I walked back to him and held it out. "Here," I said. Tyrell took the envelope. He looked confused. He opened it. He pulled out 2 pieces of paper. One was a bus ticket. Greyhound, one way, to Omaha, Nebraska. The other was a printed application form. It was crumpled and stained with coffee. It was an application for a junior driver position at King Logistics. "What is this?" Tyrell asked, looking up at me. "It is your fresh start," I said. "I do not understand," he said. "You want me to go to Omaha. I want you to learn who you are," I said. "You grew up in this house, Tyrell. You went to private schools. You went to an Ivy League college. You walked into a corner office the day you graduated. You have never been hungry. You have never been cold. You have never had to fight for anything real. That is why Harper saw you coming from a mile away. You were soft." I took a step closer to him. "You want to run this company?" I asked. "You want to sit in my chair?" "Yes," Tyrell said, his voice small. "One day." "Then you need to know what this company is," I said. "It is not spreadsheets. It is not stock prices. It is 18 wheels on black ice at 3 in the morning. It is missing your kid's birthday because the load has to get to Topeka. It is back pain and loneliness and coffee that tastes like battery acid. I built this empire on that pain, and you cannot rule an empire if you do not respect the soldiers who built it." Tyrell looked at the bus ticket. "It leaves in 2 hours," he said. "You better pack light," I said. "Dad," Tyrell said, panic rising in his voice. "You are kicking me out. Tonight, in the middle of winter." "I am not kicking you out," I said. "I am sending you to school. You are going to Omaha because we have a distribution center there. You are going to apply for a job. You will not use your last name. You will use your middle name. You will start as a loader. If you work hard, you might become a driver. If you survive that, maybe in 2 or 3 years, you can come back here and look me in the eye." 2 or 3 years, Tyrell gasped. "But I have nothing. She took all my money." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a $100 bill. I tucked it into his breast pocket. "That is enough for food for a week if you are smart," I said. "After that, you earn it." Tyrell looked at Esther. "Mom, stop him. This is insane. I have nowhere to go." Esther stood up. She walked over to him. She kissed him on the cheek. Her lips were cold. "We love you, Tyrell," she said softly. "And because we love you, we cannot let you stay here. If you stay here, you will always be the boy who was fooled. You need to become the man who survived." She turned and walked out of the room. She could not watch him leave. Tyrell looked at me. The anger was coming back. The entitlement was trying to surface. "You cannot do this," he said. "I am your heir. Right now, you are nobody." I said hard and fast. "You are a man with no money, no wife, and no spine. You have a choice, Tyrell. You can walk out that door and feel sorry for yourself. You can blame me. You can blame Harper. You can freeze to death in your bitterness. Or you can get on that bus. You can go to Omaha. You can work until your hands bleed and your back breaks. And maybe somewhere out there on the road, alone in the dark, you will find the part of yourself that Harper couldn't steal." I walked to the front door and opened it. The cold wind swirled into the warm hallway, carrying snowflakes that melted on the marble floor. "It is a long walk to the bus station," I said. Tyrell stood there for a long moment. He looked at the luxury around him. He looked at the warm fire. He looked at the life he was losing. Then he looked at the envelope in his hand. He took a deep breath. He straightened his shoulders. It was a small movement, but I saw it. It was the first real thing he had done all night. He walked toward the door. He stopped in front of me. "I will pay you back the $100, he said. "With interest," I replied. He stepped out into the night. He did not look back. He did not ask for a coat, even though he was only wearing his suit jacket. He just started walking. I watched him go. I watched my son fade into the darkness, the snow swallowing his figure. My heart was breaking in my chest. Every instinct I had as a father screamed at me to run after him, to pull him back inside, to wrap him in a blanket and give him hot cocoa. But I was not raising a child anymore. I was raising a king. And kings are not made in comfort. They are made in the cold. I closed the door. I locked it. I walked back to the library. I sat down in my chair. I looked at the fire. "Good luck, son," I whispered to the empty room. "Drive safe." The lesson had been delivered. Now it was up to him to learn it. And as I sat there listening to the wind howl, I prayed that the road would be kind to him, but not too kind, because kindness had almost killed him. It was time for the road to save him. The snow was falling on Chicago again, but this year it did not look gray and angry. It looked clean. It covered the streets in a blanket of white that seemed to silence the noise of the city and the noise of the past. I sat in my favorite leather armchair by the fireplace, listening to the crackle of the wood. The house smelled different this Christmas. Last year it smelled of expensive catered salmon and the suffocating perfume of a woman who hated us. This year it smelled of glazed ham, candied yams, and Esther famous cornbread. It smelled like a home. Esther was in the kitchen humming a gospel song. She was moving slower these days, but her spirit was lighter. The shadow of the poison had lifted. Her heart was beating strong, not just because of the medication, but because the stress was gone. She walked into the living room, wiping her hands on her apron, and looked at the Christmas tree. It was decorated with the old ornaments, the ones Harper had called garbage. The plastic reindeer with the camera in its eye was gone, locked away in an evidence locker as a reminder of how close we came to losing everything. In its place hung a simple wooden star that Tyrell had made in kindergarten 30 years ago. I checked my watch. The company was closed for the holiday, but the logistics business never really sleeps. I had spent the last 12 months rebuilding King Logistics from the ground up. It was hard work. Harper had done a lot of damage in her short time at the helm. She had alienated partners and cut corners on safety. But I went back to the basics. I put on my work boots and visited every dock, every warehouse, and every distribution center. I looked my employees in the eye and told them the truth. I told them we had been robbed, but we were not broken. I told them that if they stood by me, I would stand by them, and they did. We were profitable again. We were not making the flashy numbers Harper had promised the board, but we were making honest money, the kind that lets you sleep at night. A pair of headlights swept across the front window. Esther stopped humming. She walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. "Is it him?" she asked, her voice filled with a nervous hope. I listened. I did not hear the purr of a sports car engine. I heard the deep, rhythmic rumble of a diesel engine. I heard the hiss of air brakes engaging. It was a sound I had known for 40 years. It was the sound of work. "It is him," I said, standing up. I walked to the front door and opened it. The cold air rushed in, but it felt bracing, not biting. A large semi-truck was parked in front of my house. It was one of ours. The King Logistics logo was painted on the side, covered in a layer of road salt and grime. The driver door opened. A man jumped down. He did not look like the man who had left this house a year ago. That man had been soft. That man had worn Italian suits that fit too tight and shoes that cost too much. This man was wearing heavy work boots, flannel, and a thick canvas jacket stained with grease. He had a beard that was thick and unkempt. He looked tired. He looked worn down, but he looked strong. Tyrell walked up the driveway. He was carrying a duffel bag and a small paper bag. He walked with a different gait. He didn't strut. He walked with the heavy planted steps of a man who knows gravity. He stopped at the bottom of the steps. He looked up at me. His face was tanned from the wind and sun. His hands were rough, covered in calluses and small scars. "Hello, Dad," Tyrell said. His voice was deeper. It had gravel in it. "Hello, son," I said. "You are late." Tyrell smiled. It was a real smile. It reached his eyes. "I hit a snowstorm outside of Des Moines," he said, "and I had to chain up the tires in Iowa. It slowed me down." "You chained them up yourself?" I asked. Tyrell held up his hands. They were raw and red from the cold. "I did," he said. "Took me 20 minutes. I can do it in 15 next time." I nodded. "That is good time," I said. "Come inside. It is freezing out here." He walked up the steps. He paused at the door, wiping his boots on the mat carefully. He respected the house now. He knew what it cost to maintain it. Esther was waiting in the hallway. She did not hesitate. She threw her arms around him and buried her face in his dirty jacket. She didn't care about the grease. She didn't care about the smell of diesel. She just held her boy. "Merry Christmas." Mom, Tyrell whispered, hugging her back. He pulled away gently and looked at us. He reached into the paper bag. "I didn't have much time to shop," he said. "But I picked this up at a winery near the last drop-off." He handed me a bottle of red wine. It was not a $1,000 vintage. It was a $20 bottle, but he had bought it with money he earned driving 10,000 miles. "Thank you, son," I said, taking the bottle. "This is the best wine I have ever seen." We sat down to dinner. It was the best meal of my life. We didn't talk about stock options or mergers. We talked about the road. Tyrell told us about the diners in Nebraska. He told us about sleeping in the cab listening to the rain. He told us about the loneliness of the long haul. "It is quiet out there," Tyrell said, scooping more mashed potatoes onto his plate. "You have a lot of time to think. What did you think about?" I asked. "I thought about you," Tyrell said, looking at me. "I thought about how hard you worked to give me that life I threw away. I thought about Harper." The name hung in the air for a moment, but it did not have power anymore. "She is serving 10 years, I said. "The plea deal got her a reduced sentence, but she will be in prison until she is 40. Tyrell nodded. He took a sip of water. "I do not hate her anymore," he said. "I used to. For the first 6 months in Omaha, I was so angry I could barely see straight. I wanted her to suffer, but now I just feel sorry for her. She is stuck in a cage, and I am free." He looked at his hands. "I am tired, Dad," he said. "My back hurts, my knees ache. But I sleep. I sleep better in that truck than I ever slept in that mansion. That is because you are tired from work, not from worry," I said. Tyrell looked around the room. "Can I come back?" he asked. "Not to the house. I know I have to earn that. But can I come back to Chicago? There is an opening for a dispatch manager at the main terminal. I think I am ready to come off the road." I looked at Esther. She was smiling. "I think you are ready too," I said. "But you are not going to be a manager yet. You are going to be a lead driver. You are going to teach the new guys how to chain up their tires in 15 minutes. Tyrell laughed. "Deal," he said. Later that night, after Esther had gone to bed, Tyrell and I sat by the fire. He was drinking a beer and staring at the flames. "Dad," he said. "Yeah." "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For kicking me out," Tyrell said. "If you hadn't done that, I would have died. Maybe not physically, but my soul would have died. I would have been a bitter, broken man blaming the world for my mistakes. You saved me by letting me fall. I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. It was hard as a rock. A father job is not to keep his son comfortable, I said. It is to make him capable. You are a king now, Tyrell, not because of your name, but because you can stand on your own 2 feet. He nodded. He finished his beer and stood up. I am going to crash on the sofa, he said. I have to head out early tomorrow. I have a load going to Detroit. Sleep well, son, I said. I watched him walk away. He walked with dignity. I sat alone in the firelight, and I thought about the journey we had been on. It had been a year of hell. We had been poisoned, lied to, and robbed. But looking at the fire, I realized that the poison was necessary. You see, in nature, a forest fire is destructive. It burns down the trees. It blackens the earth. It looks like the end of the world. But the fire also clears away the dead wood. It burns away the parasites and the rot that has been choking the forest. And from the ashes, new life grows. Stronger, greener, more resilient. Harper was our fire. She burned us down. But she also burned away the arrogance in Tyrell. She burned away the complacency in me. She forced us to see what was real and what was fake. I looked at the empty wine glass on the table. To the truth, I whispered to the empty room. And to you, listening to my story, I want you to remember one thing. Family is not about blood. Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. If you have someone in your life who is poisoning your peace, who is draining your spirit, who is making you question your own sanity, you have to cut them off. It does not matter if they are your child, your parent, or your spouse. You cannot save someone who is trying to drown you. You have to be the surgeon. You have to make the cut. It will hurt. You will bleed. You will cry. But the wound will heal. The infection will stop. And you will survive. Do not be afraid of the conflict. Do not be afraid to be the bad guy in their story. Because in the story of your life, you are the hero. And heroes protect what matters. I am Grady King. I drove a truck. I built an empire. I saved my son. And I am finally at peace. Thank you for listening. If you have ever had to make a hard choice to save your family, let me know in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from. And never forget that the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. Merry Christmas. And good night. I learned that the greatest legacy a parent can leave is not a trust fund, but a backbone. Wealth without wisdom is just bait for predators like Harper. For years, I thought I was protecting Tyrell by shielding him from the cold, but I was only making him vulnerable. Real love sometimes looks like a one-way bus ticket to Omaha. It looks like letting them hit rock bottom so they can find their own footing. If you are holding someone up who needs to learn how to walk, let them go. It will break your heart in the moment, but it will save their life in the long run. Strength is not given, it is forged. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a truth bomb. And tell me in the comments below, would you have forgiven Tyrell or would you have left him in the cold? I will see you in the next story.